Hello everybody, it is I, Krisis, and I'm here to reveal my ballot for the DC Finest Most Wanted first inaugural annual ever poll, which comes with a little bit of explanation. But first of all, do not adjust your screens unless it's like fuzzy or I look bad, because it's I, Krisis with a K, coming to you live from an unseasonably gorgeous morning here in New Zealand. And I'm here with a very special presentation today because I got to work on this poll officially with DC Comics, which is just a wild thing to say, and it's a wild thing to experience. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of that story, and then we're going to go through my choices. If you don't know what poll I'm talking about, this is the first ever poll for DC Finest volume. So DC Finest, you can see them arrayed here on one side of me, are paperback collections that are comprehensively collecting a whole character or team or title line from DC Comics history, all the way from the Golden Age, all the way to Flashpoint in 2011. It's a gift, it's a boon, it's something we've never had in a comprehensive way from DC before, and I am obsessed with it. And as a member of the near mint condition polling team for the past couple of years, I am known as one of the people who helps to put these things together, along with a huge team that includes, of course, Pollmaster Jim and other folks like Brand XK, James Abel, so many people. I'm sure if I keep trying to name them, I will forget some. Dom, Taylor Talks Comics. And so DC actually talked to Omar earlier this year, and they were like, do you think maybe you might be interested in doing a poll for DC Finest, because we would really love that feedback? And Omar said to them, you should talk to Krisis. And so that is how I found myself chatting directly with DC Comics, the mothership, no restraining order there, Marvel. And I actually got to have conversations about how they think about the DC Finest line. They didn't share any spoilers with me about what books are coming, but they shared their philosophy, why they choose the things they do and how they choose the things they do. And out of that conversation came an idea of how we could format this poll. And the idea is that we didn't want to list every single volume that you could vote for, because that's overwhelming. And unlike omnibuses, what is the real fine line, gradation between Wonder Woman Bronze Volume 1 and Wonder Woman Bronze Volume 2 and DC Finest? Do people even know the difference between that material? And then, of course, there's 90 total Batman volumes, of which we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, maybe even 8 now. I don't know if I have them all on the shelf quite yet. How do you get people to distinguish between 80 other volumes they could vote for? So born from that was this idea that we were going to actually take each line and just talk about the gaps, what's missing between here and here. And if the between was too wide, then we would say, well, let's talk about ranges within the gap. So if the gap is really big, we could talk about the Silver Age within that gap, the Bronze Age within that gap, the 80s within that gap. And so we comprehensively mapped, and by me, I mean me, along with some feedback from DC, along with Dom of X and Omar, and some proofreading from Curtis, we mapped every possible missing volume range from every existing DC line. But that was kind of the easy part. The harder part was, how do we deal with all of the lines that don't exist yet? Now, I run a DC Finest tracking sheet with my internet friends Joey Hines and Charlie Pote, and we had distinguished a lot of those lines already. But something that we kind of didn't do or didn't account for is the way that DC themselves might think about some of the distinctions between the lines, and like if certain characters that were fun to map for us are actually characters that would get their own line. So in conversation with DC, we were like, well, what about these kind of like older characters? How might they work out? And DC's feedback was like, oh, well, that line, like science fiction, like war, some of these characters might fit into a bigger line like that, like action adventure or romance or humor. So that was cool feedback to have. And then we also got to announce some things live in the poll, which means I was one of the first people to find them out, which includes that Shadow of the Bat is going to be mapped into the DC Finest Batman line. It's not going to get its own line. It's going to be part of the Batman line. So there were a couple of other smaller reveals like that, characters that will go together. I think we learned through context that Black Canary is probably going to be in the Green Arrow line entirely, and she won't get her own line until she's in Birds of Prey. Then she'll be in Birds of Prey. We never said that explicitly in the announcement stream, but based on the fact that there's no Black Canary line to vote on, that would seem to be the indication. So there were a lot of other things like that too. So it's been an all-year project. I started working on it in January at the beginning of this conversation. Then we really started putting the poll together in March and April, and then April and May was all kind of editing again and again. Dom made that beautiful presentation, and that's how I come to you today. So I'm not here for you today in my official near mint capacity condition. I'm not making any comments on behalf of DC Comics. I never am. I really need to make that clear. I'm here as super fan Krisis, talking about what lines and volumes I want to see from DC Finest, and that's how we got here. So now that I gave you that introduction, I do want to say hello to some of our folks that are viewing live, and before I do, I need to put the link to the after party into the description. So those of you who have never watched one of these before, I try to keep all the question asking and answering quite focused on the topic at hand for all of this show. And then after the show is over, for people that are voting live, there's a link in the, or voting live, viewing live, although feel free to vote while you're listening. There's a link in the description where you can go directly to an after party stream that will happen right after this. Now, if you aren't watching live, or if you missed the stream because you've got to do something else, that will then later be available as a Patreon only benefit on crushingkrisis.com to view in retrospect. So that is now officially in the description. So if you reload this video at any point, it will be in the description and you will be able to watch if you are watching this live. Okay, now let's try to say hello to people. First of all, you know what? StreamYard did that thing where it cuts off the first few comments. I know I was talking to Superdrop and a couple of other people, but now I can't see them. So the unofficial first comment goes to Matt H, hoping to be home later to see live or on replay. Wiccan Solar 8164, one of the first times they've had a comment that early. Only Kane is here saying good morning. They just voted. There's actually over 2,300 votes in the poll right now, and it's still open until Tuesday at 5:30 in the afternoon. The link is in the description below. Andrew Lingard usually catches up on live streams later, but will be parked for this one. Badger Stump is here. They voted right away. My good friend Edwin Billiot is here. Mall360, Jade Rabbit, who asked some of the most awesome questions the past few months. We love to have them on stream. Suspicious Sludvich, who changes their profile picture every week, and I appreciate that level of engagement and enrichment here in my enclosure. Let's see who else said hello before the stream started, and then we will get underway. Yarna Paul's pumping for the romance line. Super Panda, who won't be watching live, but I send a greeting to them whenever they get on. Ryan Bragg is here. Keanu Leaves, what's up, gang? Ready to coast some chill vibes. I don't know, do I talk too fast for the vibes to be chill? Hash is Dead is finally here live. Welcome to you. Cedric and Ellen is here. Bonsoir. One Wheelchair X, my recent partner in crime, who I'm hoping to get back for something else sometime soon. Richard B42 saying, good grief, I'm actually here early. Well, the hair and makeup team, their choices were made. I will say, this looks a little different in person than it looks on camera. Maybe we need to dial down some of the lighting effects. And maybe it'll look, no, it still looks a little crazy. But you know what? I do have cheekbones. The cheekbones do be cheeking today. That is true. Okay, Dr. Zero had a basic list already, but waited until I was voting to pick the existing lines and went with my gut. It's funny, I had my whole graded list, but then in putting this together, there was a lot of gut happening. Nicola saying, hi, Crush Family. We'll workshop that. Saz Murph is here in case I didn't say hello but already. James Abel is here. And I think I said hello to Connor, first time watching my Harimai, as we say in New Zealand. Welcome to you. Hoping to see Bronze Age, Aquaman, and Flash win. Logan Wayne is here. You might have been one of those first few people that was chatting last night. And of course, Lance the Library, who I really don't like to stream without him here. Tom3151 was looking forward to watching this, but at the hospital. Well, we all wish you the best and that you have rest and healing. Remember, repair, restore, recover, and do that in as much time as you need. And we hope you'll be back with us live when you can. Okay, I think that's, and LOCD. Daria, I keep seeing people I love to say hello to. I think I've said Velned. But you know who I haven't seen? Body by Leafield, because I haven't done my Leafield post yet. Deaf Kiss, I don't think I've said hello to yet. And, okay, this is truly the end. Jamie C, 4799. Missed last week, but we're always happy to have you. And kia ora to my good friend in Auckland, Samantha. Okay, if you said hello after that, I might, like Jess, like Pudding Tame, oh my gosh, you just keep rolling in, and I appreciate it so much. I love saying hi to William Lee. I love saying hi to Coffee, Kauphy. Is that that spells coffee? Okay. Oh, Coffee, right. I was just listening to Coffee by Chapel Roan, and Yannick Blyer is here, and Dana is here. Okay. I will continue to see your comments as we go. So let me explain what exactly I'm doing. I am not going through every single option of the poll. There are 100 lines exactly on the poll. Just worked out that way. We didn't try to game it to be 100. Just when we were done editing, wound up at 100. I'm not ranking every 100 lines. I am also not ranking, I think there's 162 volume ranges. I'm not ranking all of those either. But I am ranking both of them, and more than just my ballot, because what would this channel be if I wasn't going a little bit over the top? So I have two separate slideshows to show you. I have the lines and I have the volumes, and I can't decide which one I should do first. I think we're gonna like alternate between them. Let's start with what's gonna be, I think volumes. We're gonna start with volumes. Okay, here we go. So this is DC volumes. We're gonna take it to the top 10, and then we're gonna switch over to lines, and then we'll do the top 10 each. This is a great question that is totally relevant to the stream. A size comparison between Finest and Epic Collections. They are exactly the same in dimensions. So I have a DC Finest here and a Marvel Epic Collection here. The dimensions are exactly the same. They're printed, I think, even at the same place. The difference is that Epic Collections are not quite as consistently lengthy as the Finest. The Finest can be as short as the Epic Collections, but we have seen Finest get very close to 700 pages. I think they've topped out in the 660 range at this point. We have generally not seen Epic Collections get quite so big. Okay, here we go. So this is my top 25 picks for what ought to be DC Finest lines. Oh, no, these are not lines. These are volumes. Volumes that are missing. Top 25 picks for volumes that are missing. And my first pick for a volume that is missing is Blue Beetle Ted Cord. Oh gosh, sorry, spoilers. I'm just trying to make this work. Okay. So Blue Beetle, we have a volume that starts all the way, not from the Golden Age, but from his Charlton years, and it's actually pretty slim. It's one of the slimmer DC Finest volumes. It's under 400 pages. That's really unusual. And this covers all the way through 1981, because that's basically all of his pre-DC material. Charlton Comics kind of was bought, and other things were happening there, and then there's nothing else left to collect. And so there is a next volume that we could do after that, which is Ted Cord's all of his other material, actually. Now, I know it says 1972 to 2005. It really could say 1981 to 2005. In fact, I maybe got that range wrong. Trust the poll, not me. But the point is that he has a series that runs from in the 80s, and this could collect all of it. Pretty much it could collect all of it up until we get a new Blue Beetle in the mantle. I have a pretty strong opinion about one thing in the DC Finest line, which is let's close some periods. Whether that's closing an entire DC Finest line, crossing it off the list so we can move to another line, or closing off a period of the line and saying, hey, we've covered all of the 80s, we've covered all of the Bronze Age, right? And you'll see that reflected a lot in my choices. These are my choices, what I genuinely want, but I buy all of them. So this is really my preference of what order they will come in. Like anything they can release, I will buy. But I want them in this order because I think if we close out this, it kind of takes care of Blue Beetle all the way through the year 2000, and then we can come back and do the Tigereyes Blue Beetle later. But this will mean we have kind of all the classic stuff and all of the Ted Kord stuff. Similarly, if we go to my next one, which is Harley Quinn, we only need one more volume of Harley Quinn. We have two already, Birth of Mirth and another one that is still pending this year that will collect all the way through most of her material before Gotham City Sirens, and then after Gotham City Sirens is Flashpoint. So we only need one more volume here. Harley Quinn does well in paperback. That's the right format for her audience, more so than Omnibus. And if we put out this third volume, we're done. So I kind of like the idea of closing out lines. And again, this is what I really want. I'm not just playing like fantasy DC Finest draft, but I'm saying if we could close out a line, that gives us a line that we can open up for another character and spots in the schedule for that line. Until we close this one out, every year we're going to be wondering, well, where's that final Harley Quinn book? So I really think that that is a good value. It covers a lot of stuff, and it lets us put her line to bed. It might have some stuff adjacent to her after Gotham City Sirens with her, but I tend to think that anything with her or Catwoman after the beginning of Gotham City Sirens will probably be in a Gotham City Sirens Finest. Okay. By the way, you only got 8 votes on the poll. Some people were real tweaked about only getting 8 votes. The reason that it's 8 is that it's almost exactly 5% of all of the options, and you got 5 votes out of 100 for the DC title lines. So it kind of perfectly weighted. Okay. So, and Richard B. pointing out when it comes to Blue Beetle, that Ted Cord 1986 to 88 series is all written by Len Wein, and at 25 issues plus a Secret Origins, it is the perfect size for volume. And that's why it says, and you may have noticed on the poll, DC was very specific about this. If there was only one volume, it said volume. This stuff at the bottom is the actual text from the poll. A couple times I shortened it a little, but if it said volume after, it really meant there's just one. Same here for Harley, volume after. So DC like really paid close attention to that. So my next one here is Justice League of America, the 1990s, but it's not really the whole 1990s. The beginning of the 1990s for Justice League was the Justice League International period, which has been collected in 3 omnibus volumes that kind of alternate the Justice League International and later Europe stuff with Justice League America as that title is birthed as well. This is the period that directly follows that. Often it's called Superman in the Justice League and Wonder Woman in the Justice League. Once upon a time, it was collected in 2 trades that reflected those titles. It's been a while since we had those trades, and I'm intensely curious to hear and see how DC plans to handle this in mapping, because again, this was not a mapping poll. I did not get into issue to issue mapping with DC. I just got into like, where would this go? Can I put this title in? Because to me, I would love to see this in the style of what they're doing in the Batman line, where they keep braiding together all of the Justice League books, and that gets pretty wild. There's Justice League America, Justice League Europe, I think Justice League Quarterly will be in this period, Extreme Justice, Justice League Task Force. There's a lot of justice teams in this period, and per DC was setting up the poll, at least at this time, we did not put separate lines for those other books. So the implication is that they will all turn up in this line. So I'm really excited for this, because even though we have the omnibuses of what comes right before this, which kind of puts it in perfect order, there's 1 or 2 things you might be able to get in there, but they're pretty well mapped. This is the Wild West in terms of that. We've only ever had Justice League America on its own. So I get excited anytime the Epic line or the DC Finest line is going to start exploring things in a way that we have not previously explored them, or mapping them in a way that we haven't previously mapped them. That makes me really eager to buy. And so the opportunity to get all of those things braided together in the 90s is like really, really exciting for me. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, by the way. Dr. Zero is saying, I liked Jurgen's GLA and some Justice League Task Force, but the rest was meh. I don't know. I guess I'll find out if they release it. My next one is a Batman book. It is Krisis. Even though you know me to not be a big Batman collector, I don't collect Batman in oversize, so it hasn't come up that much over the years. And I don't want to chase down a bunch of disconnected, random, picky, choosy Batman collections. But if you give me the chance to collect everything Batman in order across 90 volumes, y'all, I would put that on a credit card today. If they said, we're just going to do all 90 volumes of DC Finest Batman next year, you're going to get them in a series of 10 boxes. They're we're going to ship from America, and it's going to cost you $700 in shipping, and I could just get out my credit card and have them next year, you better bet your sweet dollar that I'm going to get my credit card out, because that's what I want. Give it to me. I want complete collections in chronological order, because not only as a reader, but as a researcher for my guides to explain all these things to an audience of people who don't just read DC Finest, that's huge for me. So this number 22 is Batman Bronze Age, the pre-Crisis 1980s. Now here is in a time when we had 2 volumes perfectly gatekeeping this on either side, right? We have The Curse of Crime Alley, which ends in 1980, and we have Red Skies, which is in 1985. So DC has 2 choices here. They could just keep going backwards from Red Skies, or they could go forward from Crime Alley, or they could just plunk one down in the middle. This material is really beloved by Batman fans. There's some Doug Mensch, a lot of actually Doug Mensch Batman material in here. I have never read any of it, and it's never been comprehensively collected. There are some old trades and hardcovers that have creator-based runs, but they will jump around based on what creator is on what book. We've never had both books braided together in this period, and we've never had them totally continuous with all of Batman's other appearances. And this is kind of special because it's semi-modern Batman, even though it's still pre-Crisis, but it's before all of the miniseries and all of the OGNs. And so it's kind of like Batman that is kind of has an amount of continuity, but isn't interrupted every 2 seconds for something else. So that's really exciting to me. I probably am not going to read these for a while because I'm currently reading post-Crisis Batman. So these are kind of just padding out my shelves for some later pre-Crisis Batman read, but I still very much want them. And in the scope of all of the Batman things on the poll, this one really excites me again because I love unexplored territory. Edwin Billiot said, I let others vote for Batman. I got a bit more niche. Whereas Lance said, my votes were Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Legion. taking all the big ones. Goody says there's been some gems in here. You would get the first Jason Todd too. I have most of these as single issues. But Richard B42 makes a good point that I think I should mention. Says, I think I'll be waiting for this to be in the Batman Bronze Age Omnibus. And that is one of the things that for me personally, I did consider in my voting here, but less so than on Marvel. Because at Marvel, I do buy a lot of their omnibus. I do be buying omnibuses. And so sometimes when I'm looking at prioritizing something that's not an omnibus, like if we had an Epic poll, it'd be like, okay, well, it would be nice to have that X-Men book in Epic, but I buy X-Men in omnibuses. So is that really a priority? At DC, I really only buy Wonder Woman and Sandman stuff in omnibus. So like, even if this will happen in omnibus, that's a good reason for it not to be number one for me. Like if something's probably happening in omnibus sometime soon, I feel selfish putting it at number one just because I'm this asshole that doesn't buy omnibuses. But knowing that it's going to be an omnibus at some point, in many cases in this list, kind of lessened my ardor for having the thing, because I'm like, well, I guess the people who wanted an omnibus, it's going to get there more quickly, and so it probably makes sense to get there more quickly. Cedric and Ellen, 70s Batman, to me, 70s Batman is like so much closer to being omnibus because we just got that Bronze Age Volume 1. And while I want DC to continue, it's kind of like that everybody's about to get that. And my votes, I can't help. Sometimes I'm voting for me, but a lot of my justification, which you'll see, especially on the lines, is I'm kind of voting based on what I think should be out there. So I am playing fantasy a little. I can't help it because like the order I put these books in is the order I really think should be prioritized with this material for moi. And so for me, this stuff that's farther away from getting omnibused is a little bit more attractive. A great question here from Jade Rabbit. Does DC Finest just collect the story, for example, Batman Long Halloween, or would DC Finest collect Catwoman Rome alongside that, or is that in its own Catwoman DC Finest? Well, there's a couple of gradations of answer there. DC Finest is collecting everything in chronological publishing order, and as a part of that, if a main character who has a line like Batman has a particular villain or side character who makes their own appearances and doesn't have their own line, they'll probably be in that line too. So one of the really popular questions in the poll was, there's some Tales of Bizarro from the Silver Age, and it's not in the Superman family line, which I think is where people thought it should show up. And when I asked DC, they didn't answer about that specifically, but they said the way to think about it is, if a character is so strongly associated with a certain hero like Superman, and there's no chance of them getting their own line at this time, like Bizarro, it's probably going to be in the Superman line. Catwoman is an interesting example because she does have her own line. And I do think when it gets to where When in Rome was printed chronologically, it probably will be in the Catwoman line. No insider information. That's just me reading the tea leaves from DC. That said, I do think there is one other place it could appear in the Batman line, which I'll talk about some other time. But in short, because it's a flashbacky story, it could also fit in the Legends of the Dark Knight Batman line, which we learned from the poll would be separate from this main Batman line. Okay, let's continue to Doom Patrol. I just saw, I think, Max, who I did some fun stuff with on the internet this weekend, but you'll have to come to the after show if you want to talk about that. The link should be in the description. Let me know if you don't see it in the description. Max I was too busy thinking of his beautiful face, and I didn't actually read his comment. I would vote for Doom Patrol, Deadman, and Batmite. Well, here's Doom Patrol. Right on the verge of my top 20 is Doom Patrol Bronze Age to pre-Marson. Now, here's an example where I thought it was volume singular, and Dees is like, you might want to put volumes. And I was like, okay, again, it wasn't a mapping exercise, but if they said jump, I said, to what height should I jump? And so here's the thing about this. Doom Patrol is extremely well covered in omnibus. It's not an omnibus title for me. There's finite space in the house. There's finite dollars in the budget. However, it is very much going to be a paperback title for me. And I actually have it pretty high on my list. If you remember my top 100 runs I want to read, I really want to read this pre-Marson Doom Patrol because they were like DC's X-Men, sort of, especially in the Silver Age. The X-Men were very much copying off of them. Then the X-Men got popular in the 70s and early 80s, and Legion and Teen Titans were kind of that level of popular for DC. So then DC was like, hey, what if we rebooted Doom Patrol finally and brought our weirdos back? And as we all know, that only lasts about 18 issues, I think, 18 or 19, and then Marson takes over. But I'm so fascinated by that period of like Doom Patrol being played totally straight, and it's by, I think his name is Paul Kupperberg in that period. So I actually did start reading it, but I didn't want to buy the omnibus, so I was reading on DC Online, and I was like, oh, it would be nice if this was in a paperback format. So I would really like this. I probably would immediately, finally start a Doom Patrol read if I had this. And then, of course, there's 1,000 different versions of Doom Patrol by Grant Morrison. Dr. Zero focused, I lost it. Dr. Zero voted on never collected material, and you will see I do place a priority on that the higher we go, but I tried to be honest. If there were things that I really, really, truly just want to hold in my hot little hands, I didn't want to pretend that I was totally altruistic and wanted things for the community. Some things I just wanted for myself. Nicola saying Doom Patrol Bronze was my number 8. Sonic's Comics hasn't seen any of his choices on my list yet. Flash, Supergirl, and Batgirl. And Edwin Billiot saying the Steve Lytle art on this title is gorgeous. Superjob says it's good we're voting for errors and not individual volumes, which would split the votes even more. Yeah, that was part of the intent. It's going to get hard as years go on because the more that DC releases, the more we're going to get things split and have like individual titles left over between the landmarks that are already in the line. But the thing that I'm kind of excited about is that I think it seems like DC is thinking of these things in clusters, and they're not going to go full Epic Collection on it where it's like choosey. It seems like, and we're only a year and a half into this too with solicits, that they're kind of doing clumps. And so I think it'll work out in our favor because I don't think they're going to abandon things for too long. It really seems like they're going to do a clump, and kind of once that clump is all a block on your bookshelf, then we'll be voting on things still on either side of that clump, when previously we were just voting for things on either side of a volume. I don't know if that's really going to be the case, but it seems like we're moving in that direction. All right, now we're to my top 20, and I think we're taking this all the way to the top 10 before we switch to lines. Wonder Woman. Now, you know me to love Wonder Woman, and you know me to collect Wonder Woman and Omnibus. This is a very interesting example of, I don't think there's an omnibus to be made here. There's only about a year of Wonder Woman after conclusion of Gail Simone's run, which we have in 2 volumes already in DC Finest. So this would be the final Wonder Woman volume, much like there's a final Harley Quinn volume. There's not a whole lot of characters where we've gotten to a final volume yet, especially because for most characters, that's very close to Flashpoint. Now, I call this often Wonder Woman by J. Michael Straczynski just as a wayfinding note, but actually other people do work on it and write it as well. I have this in trade paperback, so it's not the highest priority for me. Like, you could easily kind of get all of this in trade paperback. The thing that's interesting to me, though, is clearly DC Finest is not just going to do 14 issues. Like, that's just not going to happen. So it's going to collect other Wonder Woman stuff in this period, and there are some Wonder Woman retroactive issues that it could collect, and I'm just interested to see like what else they pull in to not just make this too slim, because it's their last chance, basically. And that's really interesting about all of these final pre-Flashpoint volumes as we get there. It's kind of like DC's last shot to cast around for stragglers to put into the volume. So they actually might not be in a hurry to do this, because it actually might be a little intimidating to make those choices this early in the line. They might kind of like want to wait a little, but maybe they've perfectly mapped it. I did not have a mapping conversation with them. I like this though, because again, I'm thinking in clumps, and I suspect DC is thinking in clumps, where this is like, okay, Wonder Woman from Gail Simone to the end, this clump is done. We don't need to keep thinking about that as one of our release windows. Now we can think about some other release window in Wonder Woman. So I want it. I already have it. It's already been printed in trade, but it's never been reprinted. So it's been over 15 years since we have seen it. Yorna Paul's, Yannick's number 5. Do I buy the Simone DC Finest? Yes, I am committed to the whole DC Finest line because I'm a crazy person. Lance plans to buy every Wonder Woman DC Finest, but Chris Kaufman went for the niche stuff. I think that Madame Xanadu line would be really cool. We'll talk about my lines votes in a bit. Have I ever read any Legends of the Dark Knight? Yes. Oh, I'm not saying this in like, you're not a big enough fan. Everybody's the fan that they are. I'm just surprised because I know you like Batman, that you haven't read any Legends of the Dark Knight, but it's very rarely been in print. So it's not really that surprising. It is on DC Universe Infinite. Yeah, it's real good. You know how we all felt about Dark Patterns last year? How we're like, oh my gosh, it's Batman divorced from his normal drudgerous continuity. It's set early in his life. It's a really cool case. It's informing us about how he became who he is. It's a kind of story you can only tell with a young Batman that's not as resourceful as the adult Batman that we know now. That's what all of Legends of the Dark Knight was. It was high caliber creators telling 2 to 5 issue stories, which at the time arcs was not a thing. This is 1992, I think, and telling arc-based stories of Batman in kind of earlier in his career in the same way that the Long Halloween works. That's why everybody's so obsessed with it. Edwin Billion saying a strange period for Wonder Woman, and Sonic saying I do have these in trades, but I would sell them for the finest. Okay, let's continue. Drops of Saturn, hello to you, saying the only Legend of the Dark Knight I've read was Gothic, awesome, and Faces mid. All right, now we're into my top 20. Here is Batgirl Cassandra Cain. Now, this is a relatively rare example in the poll of a volume that that is not a final volume or a first volume, but it's still only a volume because, and this is interesting for Batgirl, the Batgirl one that we have, No One Dies Tonight, starts with issue 7 of this Batgirl series starring Cassandra Cain. And a lot of people, including me, when it came out, was like, why wouldn't you start with issue 1? But then, as we did the math, we realized, and we looked at how some of the other lines are rolling out, that the first Cassandra Cain volume is almost certainly going to double dip an amount of material, not all of the material, from No Man's Land, because that's what really introduces her and gives her context, and so it belongs in her line, right? So we're going to get that in that volume 1, and that's why this is kind of, the one we have is kind of a volume 2. So this volume 1 will only have 6 issues of her actual series, but it'll probably have all of her introduction. When the DC Finest line was just kicking off, when we saw the gap, we were like, oh, it's probably going to also have some Barbara Gordon Batgirl in it too. Now I don't think we think that's the case anymore. It seems like there's plenty of cast stuff to go here. So the thing is, we've had this collected a few times. The missing stuff in Cass's Batgirl collection is the later stuff that has never been collected properly or recollected properly. We've had this first 6 issues many times over in a couple of different formats. So even though I know fans are rabid for it and it's the #1 vote on the Omnibus poll, I am not as rabid about it because it's like, it's gonna happen and we've already got it, but it's still in my top 25 because again, clumps. I'm like, if there's a 1 volume gap, I want to finish that out. And so when we know we're done Cass, which I think is going to take like 2 more volumes, I think, then we'll know Cass is done. Then we can go to a Babs Batgirl clump, or we could go to a Stephanie Batgirl clump. And I think looking at how big the DC Finest line is, I think it's almost fictional to think that like any line that has ever had a book released in that title line is kind of alive. I think as certain clumps get put to bed, it might be like that line goes to sleep until we see it again. So if they finish all of the cast material, I would not think of the Batgirl line as being like live anymore. I would kind of be like, ooh, it's dormant, it's sleeping, it's hibernating until we see like a Stephanie Batgirl or a Babs Batgirl get solicited. So, and I think about that even for lines that don't have character changes. I think like when Wonder Woman gets to that JMS final Wonder Woman volume, I'll think, okay, they might have put 2000's Wonder Woman to bed until we see it again. Because I just think that's really wise. It's clever. It's what I really like about how they're doing this. James reminding you that you can still vote on the poll, and the link is in the description. Jamie C saying, this is my favorite bat-related run of all time. Oh, sorry, but Patrick voted too, but I was trying to get Jamie saying this is my favorite bat-related run of all time. And Richard B saying, I voted Cass at #6, but went to the other side of the existing volume. Drops of Saturn saying, wouldn't all this previous cast material already be in No Man's Land? Yes. The thing is, DC seems to be interested in very limited double dips in the DC Finest line with a caveat. And that caveat is, if the double dip is essential to introducing the character and it's directly adjacent to the beginning of their own material, then they will double dip. So an example where they were firm that they will not double dip is they are not planning on putting any Teen Titans material into Nightwing's line, if Nightwing's line were to ever exist, because to them it's all in the Teen Titans book, and the Teen Titans book happens like years before the first solo Nightwing stories that would be in the Nightwing book. So they're like, there's no reason to double dip from a whole other line the way Marvel did with Silver Surfer Volume 0. It's different for Batgirl because that No Man's Land material happens directly prior to her series. Her series spins out of it directly, so it's like useful context. And it wouldn't collect all of No Man's Land. It would only collect like her debut and her main issues in No Man's Land. So I don't think there's a hard and fast rule there, but it does seem kind of like the logic we can apply to most lines when we're trying to look at them and map them, which is that if the character's introduction in another title and early establishing material is so close to the launch of their series that it's not separated by lots of continuity, that's almost certainly going to go in a DC Finest line with their stuff. At least that's the rule for now. None of these are forever. You know that my whole thing is data or it doesn't happen. All I can do is prognosticate based on what's currently been announced, and my prognostication has been slightly fine-tuned by what I can glean from some of my conversations with DC, which have not been privileged in any way, which are just kind of their comments on like, oh, we think of this run as this, or we think of that starting there. And I say like, oh, is that public knowledge? And they're like, yeah, I think that's pretty much public knowledge. So, okay. Would Oracle stuff go in a Batgirl line? That I don't know. I think that Babs would probably have some post-killing joke stuff on it until she starts appearing in Birds of Prey. And my suspicion is anything from Birds of Prey forward would then be in the Birds of Prey line. And that would enable the Birds of Prey line and DC Finest to maybe have a slight edge over the omnibuses in that it's like got everything Babs instead of just Birds of Prey. Okay. Number 18 for me is Superman Post-Crisis Pre-Triangle. So we have one volume of this. We have Superman, Man of Steel, and I forget if it's announced or released. I don't see it on my shelf, so I think it's announced and not yet released. But what we don't have is the few things before that. Now, again, this is me being selfish. This is already existing in Omnibus, completely covered, except for Actions Comics weekly stories of Superman, which kind of got skipped by the omnibuses, which would be in the sequence of books. But Superman has 3 titles throughout this period, so it's going to take a while to do it. We're not even all the way through Byrne's run. So I think in this case, what we don't have in Omnibus is this actual material, the beginning, the Byrne stuff. And it seems like the drum is beating pretty hard for it. I think it was like number 3 or 4 on the Omnibus poll this year. So in this case, I'm being selfish. I'm like, I know I'm not going to buy it in Omnibus. I don't collect oversized Superman. So let's just get that whole Byrne period out in DC Finest. Let me have it. It's another one of my reading projects to read Superman from the beginning of Post-Crisis. I'm not super far into it though, because I pretty much have only read the contents of the forthcoming DC Finest volume. So for me, I'm like, oh, well, this would make my reading project easier. Let's get it. Yeah, Man of Steel coming out in November. Mighty Futz saying hello. And Superjob pointing, yeah, there's not a ton of Oracle stuff, but basically Babs does have significant appearances between Killing Joke and Birds of Prey, and the question is like, would times that she's not in the Batgirl uniform fit better in Batgirl or in Birds of Prey? Okay. Let's continue to my number 17 pick. I bet you didn't expect to see this from me, and it's interesting because DC Finest allows me to pick some things that I would not pick on an omnibus pick, which is Legion of Superheroes, the Baxter era. So there's a couple of different gaps in Legion of Superheroes, and I've really never read any Legion of Superheroes, but here's what I know. I know that Legion of Superheroes was one of the biggest titles in all of comics in 1984, and that's why it was relaunched and renumbered in 1984, and why it was so big in comic shops. I don't know when I'm going to have the patience to read all of Legion, all the way from the Silver Age, or even from the beginning of Conway or the beginning of Levitz. But I do know that if it would collect just 1984 to 1989, I do have an attention span for that. And DC has never comprehensively printed this. So that's why it does so well in the Omnibus poll. This feels like another one like Man of Steel, where like the Omnibus will always be big news when it comes out. And so I don't think it steals any thunder from the Omnibus to do it in Finest. In fact, I actually think this is kind of like Suicide Squad, where they could probably put out an Omnibus and a DC Finest at very similar times, and they would probably both do very well, and all sorts of people would be very, very happy. Lars bribed, Krisis confirmed, says Suspicious Sluddovich. Henry Wood says, how much did Lars pay you to pick this? But I think it's just that Lars has worn me down over the years. And David McSwain saying one of my top picks. Dr. Zero saying my number 1 pick and number 3 on the Omni poll. Lance saying Baxter Arrow is my number 7. We are counting up to my top pick, or down to my top pick. Down in numbers, up in importance. Okay, number 16, Supergirl by Peter David. Here's an example again. I'm thinking about the chunks, and I just think that it would be great to get this run of Supergirl out. There's great affection for it. Everybody loves Peter David. It has been collected in some ways previously, but not in a comprehensive, perfected way like this. I think this is one that will always sell. There's always great interest in it. It does well in the Omnibus poll, even though we've got some volumes out on Finest already. We have 2 volumes announced for Finest. I think we might need 2 left. Again, not a mapping exercise, just a what I want next exercise. I would like them to keep on rolling forward with Supergirl, because I really think that it would be nice to get that period done, and then we could go back and do more Silver Age, or even some of her early 80s stuff, which has never been effectively collected. Next, at number 15, again, some of my picks are selfish. This is not just me thinking about the world and the goodness of the world. This is thinking about moi. And for moi, this is a big one. Green Arrow by Mike Grell. It's probably my favorite stuff in DC Finest. It pains me that I didn't buy the omnibuses, but there have to be rules for everybody's collection. And my rule is I don't do oversized DC unless it is Wonder Woman, WildStorm, or Sandman, period. So I know there's an oversized Krisis right behind me. Don't look at that. So I'm never going to buy those micro omnibuses, and the trades are long gone that originally printed it. So selfishly, I just want to see us blow through this Mike Grell stuff in DC Finest. I think it's some of DC's finest comics, quite omnibusly. Obviously, honestly was the word I was going for there. Goody loves Grell and has the Omnis and the DC Finest. Def Kiss would love to start reading more Green Arrow, and Yarn and Pull is saying, they're too big anyway. How come no oversize except for those 3? Because Mighty Fest, there's got to be rules. So many people really engage with whenever I say that I have rules, and people are like, tell me more about the rules, or like, how does that rule work? So I think I might do a whole stream of it at some point in the next couple of months of like, not only what my rules are, but then helping you build your rules. I think it's really important because we all have a finite budget. And we all have finite space. And that's the thing. If you're really good at saving up your money and making a good budget for your books and you're never under budget pressure, you might be sitting there thinking like, I can buy whatever I want. I'll be able to buy whatever I want forever. But eventually the lack of space comes for us all. And eventually, as somebody who has a collection of tens of thousands of comic books, as I know some of you do as well, at the point that it's taking up your life, just if you want to find something, it's a day-long project, or if you've got to move them to a different room of your house, it's like a multi-day project, that things taking up a lot of space starts to take up a lot of time too. So I eventually will do a stream on that. But yeah, my rules, no oversized Green Arrow. So my number, now we're getting towards my top 10, my pick number 14, and I feel pretty strongly about this. At points, this was higher for me. I want 90s Superboy. This, I think, is the first time you've seen me pick something that is not directly adjacent to another book, really, because this does not, we only have one Superboy volume, and it is like a Silver Age, 1954, 1955. It's Superboy's Superdog from Krypton. But this, I'm like, fuck your clumps. Your lovely lady clumps. Sorry, I was quoting the Black Eyed Peas badly there. I don't want a Silver Age clump of Superboy. I want a 90s clump of Superboy. And here's the thing. With all of the excitement about Triangle right now, this is kind of adjacent to Triangle era. And so I think that this is the right time to get some Triangle era stuff out in print. This is one of my top 60 picks on my DC Omnibus list. I just don't know if this version of Superboy, because there's so many different Superboys, I think it's hard to sell any Superboy in Omnibus because there's just so many Superboys. It's not like any one character you can get super, super excited about. So my excuse is like, okay, well, let's just do it in DC Finest rather than Omnibus, because Finest can blow through this material so quickly. I just think this run is so fun to me. Carl Kessel writes a lot of it. It's got a lot of art by Tom Grummett. It's kind of this like, I'm bad Superboy. Dun, 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 dun. He's bad with his leather jacket. And I just find that really entertaining. It's not even that I have like affection for it, because I don't think I read that much of it at the time in the 90s. I just think that there's so many, I have trouble with the idea that Superboy exists at the same time as Superman. I don't think that there's like I don't have a lot of use for that. And so I need Superboy to have like an angle. So I think the angle works if it's John Kent and it's Superman's son. It's a shame they aged him up. That ruined the character, but that allowed him to, anyway. Topic for another time. It's after Flashpoint. But I do like this Superboy because to me, it feels like he has intent. There's a reason he exists. He's not just Junior Superman. Goody says, I loved this when I was a young teen. Renaming Superboy and the Ravers is about the most 90 thing they could have done. Well, there were 2 titles. It was not just renamed to Superboy and the Ravers. It was a separate book. I did confirm with DC that the Superboy line would collect the stuff right before Flashpoint. They did not comment on how much Superboy Prime, like Infinite Crisis stuff, would have to be in the Superboy volume, but they did say yes, it could continue all the way to 2011. Because again, it wasn't a mapping exercise. I just had to make sure that directionally all of the hints were right. So again, I'm not picking a specific volume here. That's not what the poll exercise was. They could put anything from this period out. They could put out that last volume right before Flashpoint. I would be a little bit less excited about that. What I want is what is on the cover here. I want the first volume of Superboy from the 1990s. Okay, my number 13 pick, again, maybe a little bit surprised because DC Finest does allow me to pick things that I would not necessarily pick in Omnibus. Because in Omnibus, it's all very academic for me, but in DC Finest, I would buy them all. Justice Society of America in the Golden Age. Now, DC was great about knocking out 2 volumes of this very quickly. It got us all the way from 1940 to 1945. That's incredible. However, this DC Archives line went for quite some time, which means there's a good news story there. We already have this material restored, and they might be doing additional restoration on it for the DC Finest line, but it means like there's something to start from. They're not having to like dig out camera readies of this art necessarily issue by issue, page by page, or like rescan stuff. Maybe they are, but they don't necessarily have to. So it's going to take a couple more volumes before we get out of that archived material and into some material, I think, that exists outside of archived. I don't know. I have a guide for this on Crushing Crisis that can answer that question, but I really would like to see this keep happening. I think there is room in this current world for Golden Age reprints, pardon me, And I think that Justice Society has a lot of historic value, and I think it would be nice to see it accessible in a line that DC has the ability to go back to print on whenever they want. And just selfishly, I would like to see it. And this is less selfish than some of that other stuff like Grail, Green Arrow, because those DC archives are kind of like long gone. Like it's been a really long time since they've existed. So this has not been accessible for a while. Edwin Billiot, who knows me very well, is surprised, but good pick. Max says, I love that cover. It looks like they're all going to a picnic on a beach or something. Well, I think the text on the bottom is like, Batman and Superman hang out with the Justice Society, which was a big deal. Goody's saying, I'd buy it, but it's going to be a chore to read. But Nicola's saying it was my number 4. I really need to get to that John Broome issues. Every time I try to read the early JSA stuff, says Sludvich, I forget the plot intricacies during 75% of the reading time. Yeah, it kind of is like, you go on a journey in every issue. And Ted just saying hello. Scott Denham made a doc of his rules after hearing me talk about it. I can't wait to do that stream. I think it would be really, really fun. Doc Zero saying, I wouldn't pay money for Golden Age Omnis I might never read, but I'm all for GCF. And that's the thing too. An omnibus is like such a money investment and a space investment that I feel like then for me, reading Golden Age Batman, it's slow going, and not in an unpleasant way, but like one issue of Golden Age Batman, that's like an hour, because I might like stop and make myself a smoothie. I might like go and get floss my teeth. Like it's like reading a novel to me. Like you can put it down and take a break. And so I feel like an omnibus, some Kid Krisis blew through those Wonder Woman Golden Age omnibuses in like a week or two. That's the style that she reads. For me, who's pour moi, the way that I read is kind of in little chunks. That's why I like reading comic books. And those Golden Age comics are not little chunks. Like you might spend a half hour reading one issue. And so that's, for me, an omnibus, like, oh my gosh, really good value, but it feels really daunting. Whereas like in paperback, I'm like, oh, I could do that. I could like keep that on my nightstand and like read an issue over the course of a couple of nights, maybe. So. Okay, let's continue. We're almost into my top 10, in which case we're going to switch to lines. This is one I feel really strongly about, and I had this in my top 8 on the actual voting at one point. So this is post-Crisis Aquaman. And here's the thing. This is one of my times where I'm like, DC Finest is a better way to deal with this than Omnibus, because what we do have is a Peter David Omnibus. But what that Omnibus does not have is the immediately post-Crisis stuff before Peter David takes over, which includes something called the Atlantis Chronicles, which is like the whole established history of Atlantis in the DC world. And then Aquaman has a mini-series, I think, and also some specials. So I know that, again, I'm only picking a time range here, and they could start anywhere. And the chances of them starting with the Peter David Volume 1 is probably really strong, because that's really popular material, and it'll be a few years since the omnibus has been out, and so it will seem attractive to them. What I would actually like is that they would start with the volume that comes before the Peter David material, which I think they could get away with doing, because it's kind of in the solicits, like it could be like, read the material that came before the great Peter David run, and it's never, that stuff has never been collected. So whether it starts immediately with that, and this is one of those specials that is not in the Peter David omnibus because it's from before him, or whether it starts with Peter David, I really remember liking that Aquaman. I remember buying the 0 Hour issue because that was around my time, but I didn't really read a lot of it at the time. And Aquaman's not an omnibus character for me. So selfishly, I want this, but also unselfishly, there is some stuff that this could collect that's not omnibus stuff. It also could collect the stuff after Peter David's run that has not been omnibused as well. So we'll see how DC approaches it. DC seems to have no fear about recollecting omnibus material in DC Finest, which I think is great, but there's also really good hooks to collect the stuff before and after here as well. Goody saying, Atlantis Chronicles really strong. I recently read all the material before it, and I really enjoy the Giffen Mini too. Connor saying Aquaman is so under collected. Ted saying, are these choices guessing what books probably won't be collected in omnibus format? Not officially, Ted. It's kind of just my internal barometer of, well, it's what I want. And since I don't buy Aquaman on omnibus, this could be coming on an omnibus tomorrow, and it might still be on my list, but I did take into account the selfishness factor, and if something was really recently an omnibus, sorry, knocking over some books on the ground here. If something was really recently an omnibus, or if it like seems like it's a sure thing for omnibus because the omnibus line is like approaching it, that kind of like lessened my desire a little bit, because I'm like, well, let's let it come out in the omnibus first. I am a practical voter on all these polls. I don't want to vote for stuff, even in my imaginary votes that don't actually get points, that are like probably not going to happen for very good reasons. And I think that this is one of those cases. Yornia Paul is calling him Wet Guy. Okay. All right, so this is number 11. Oh, no, wait. Apparently, I decided that number 11 is important enough that we can't see it yet. Okay. Sorry about it. So now, before we go into my top 10 there, we are going to do, how do I get it onto the stage? Hold on. Now we're going to talk about, that's not what I want though. Okay, remove. Then what happens? There we go. So now we're going to talk about the lines that I want. We're going to come back and do the rest of those volumes. Never fear. So now we're going to talk about, however, some lines that I want. So let's talk about the first one here. My number 25 pick, I did a top 25 for both, which means we're going over 50 in total. So I got to keep it pumping. My number 25 most wanted new DC Finest line is Booster Gold. Why? So Booster Gold is pretty much a post-Crisis character, and we've seen all of it collected, more or less. DC's did some hardcovers for him. They have a trade series. He's popular in this format. Not an omnibus, maybe, but he's very popular in a standard size format. So this isn't my highest choice because it exists. But there's a certain attraction to me to getting it all together in one place in one reprintable format. It seems like DC, unlike Marvel, is willing to go back to press on DC Finest, whether it's in the short range or in the long range. Clearly, that's going to be harder as we continue to get 40-ish of them a year. I think this year was 36 of them a year. I'm not announcing anything. I'm just saying 40-ish. It's going to be harder to keep them all in print. But for somebody like Booster Gold, who's kind of like eternally mildly popular, that this would give them a format that like 5 years from now, they could put them back into print. Because the oldest material right from after Crisis for Booster Gold, it hasn't been in print for 7 years. And they're not going to go back to print on those hardcovers because that's not a format that DC reprints. So having a DC Finest is a chance for them to have it in a format that they would reprint. So I have at the bottom of each of these slides, and feel free to like screenshot or zoom in if you want. Should I be putting these slides on my Patreon? I've never done that before because I want you to go to the guides on DC, or on Crushing Crisis, but for some of these, there's no guide yet. But I did put on the bottom the general material that would fit into this. It is not exhaustive. It is not a map. This is not a mapping exercise. I just wanted to give an idea of how much main material there is for that character so we could kind of visualize how much there is here. So his original 1986 series is 25 issues, and then he's got a little bit of stuff in Action Comics around that time as well. So that's probably just one Finest. Then he has 47 issues in a 1 million that comes later. So that's probably 2 more Finest. So we're pretty much looking at a 3 Finest line. To me, that is a sweet spot because if you start a Finest line and it's a 3-book line and you get them out in 3 sequential years, now we've put that line to bed. This, looking at Booster Gold, really made me look at the whole list of all the lines. I need a drink of water. Made me look at the list of all of the lines and kind of say to myself, how many of these could we just start and be done in 3 years if we started them in 2027? So there's probably a lot of lines that we could start in 2027, have it 27, 28, 29, and then be in 2030 and cross them off. And if you take the perspective that we were pretty comprehensive on this poll, and DC's probably not planning a lot of lines other than the 100 lines that are on the poll, it's really kind of important and big every time we can cross off a whole line. So in the same way that I want them to finish the Harley Quinn line and be done with it, in the same way that I want them to finish whole chunks like the late 2000s Wonder Woman, I would love to start Booster Gold so we can do it and we could finish it. Wiccan saying that cover looks great. He's got a lot of good covers. Mr. Lamb Space Monkey saying Booster is my number 5, internally mildly popular. Well, I mean, Booster's never been the top selling character, but there's always people who love Booster, and every time he comes back, he does well. Andrew Lingard saying, I'd get this. And Booster Gold was my number 5, saying Richard B. I thought it would be your number 1, given your profile picture. Wasn't planning to vote for him at all, but I couldn't break a 6-way tie, so I threw him in there instead. Okay, my number 24 pick is Blue Devil. Why? More like who? Blue who? Not Blue Beetle, not Etrigan the Demon. No, Blue Devil. He has popped up a couple times recently. And again, this is me taking the perspective of looking at those the 100 lines that I hammered out with DC over months that they were okay with me saying publicly. And who knows, they could have a secret. They could have a plan that's not represented on there. But DC was pretty forthcoming, and their whole, I mean, I did at one point have a message directly from Dustin Kitchens, who's the collected editions department, the director of the department, who I didn't directly talk with the whole time, but he was like, the whole idea is spoil our plans. Like, we're not holding anything back. That's why we got to talk about the Shadow of the Bat thing on the stream. He's like, it's fine to let people know what we're planning. That's the point of this. And so now that I know what 100 they're planning, Blue Devil maybe is 1 book. His series is only 31 issues and an annual. It's, I don't think, ever been comprehensively reprinted. Could we throw in a little bit of extra Blue Devil here or there? Yeah, and especially if the 31 issues in the annual is a little bit too big for one volume, then maybe it's two smaller volumes and we get some like other appearances of him. But again, this permanently crosses off something from the 100 list. And plus, it's just like this fun, complete 80s character that we can have all in one place that honestly is probably never going to be in enough prominence that he's going to get an omnibus. I mean, DC tends to really focus on bangers and omnibuses. We'll talk about that next week when we do our DC fantasy draft. So this kind of like more niche material, probably not coming to an omnibus near you anytime soon. So this is our shot. And so I really, really, really would like to see this in DC Finest, knock it out in one, maybe two volumes. Super Chop just read 2 issues this morning. So how was it? Was it good? Edwin Billiot saying another post-Crisis series that needs a DC Finest. And Badger Stump would buy it on day one, and the cover pops so well. I love the part where I choose the covers. That is so fun. And Lance saying there's some Blue Devil stuff in the Legend of Wonder Woman DC Finest, was interested to read as someone who had never heard of the character before. Yeah, I hardly know who he is. I think he was just in Jamal Campbell's Zatanna, I think, last year, I was like, who is this guy? And so then I learned about Blue Devil. Okay. Yonder Paul saying, that's too niche for moi. I think it's like, how many of my catchphrases can we get into it in a world? That's too niche for moi. Right? It's like I'm like a Tickle Me Elmo and you pull my string, and that's all the things that I say. Super Jop saying they were Crisis tie-in issues. They were fine. Okay. My number 23 pick. Y'all, I'm going to keep stumping for this until it happens, but I think I have a better shot in DC Finest than I do in Omnibus, and let me talk about why. This is Black Orchid. Black Orchid was a Bronze Age character that also briefly appeared in Swamp Thing, that later Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean came together and launched in 3 issues for what eventually we'd think of as Vertigo, but it wasn't Vertigo. It was just Neil Gaiman pitching to DC. That did not click, and later Gaiman got the chance to do Sandman. But those of you who are like, oh, Neil Gaiman, he only wrote those 3 issues. Then this has an ongoing series of 22 issues in an annual. So the great thing about this is, again, this is on the lines list. This is one book, I'm pretty sure, because there's only a little bit of Bronze Age material, and there's a 22 issue series in an annual. Maybe 2 books if you stretch for all of her stuff, but I think it might just be 1 volume. And again, doing this, it gets material into print that has never been in print before. It crosses off a volume to be never thought of again. And the popularity of other books in the DC Finest line can subsidize choices like this. So DC Finest, yes, each book has its own print run. They don't all get printed the same. Clearly, they print more of Batman than they print of War. But it's obvious from the choices they've made in the past year that there's, much like omnibuses, that there's a lot of bangers, the Batmans, the Supermans, the Justice Leagues, and then there's stuff that's maybe a little bit less popular, more niche. Do you think if they were just trying to have top sellers in every single book, they would have put out a freaking science fiction book? No, there's clearly a subsidizing process that's happening where the bigger books are allowing smaller books to come out. So this is a smaller book, but it's a book that I think ties into Swamp Thing, ties into Sandman, ties into Vertigo, and I don't think it's ever going to be popular enough to get an omnibus. So I really think DC Finest is the place that it should be. How would I do Children's Crusade, since they did that trade, is one of the weirdest things I've seen any publisher do. I don't think every one of these characters needs all of Children's Crusade. I think that really belongs in Books of Magic for the whole thing. So I just think you gather the relevant parts there. For Evan, it almost made the top 5. There's some Jill Thompson art in here, and it's always a big plus. I love, love, love that. And Practical Match is saying, I love the work that went into this poll and with DC for actively being involved. It's very, very cool to me that they were as involved as they were. And Kuramai saying, yep, I can see this as a DC Finest, but nothing else. Raleigh Jin saying Black Order is my number 2. So I'm so excited to see that. Max asking about how they collect Batman No Man's Line and DC Finest in the Batman line. The Batman line, the main lines for each character are going to collect their full crossovers. And then I think much like we've seen in the compendiums for Robin and Nightwing, when that gets to something like No Man's Land, it just collects the things that are specific to those characters. So I think for any big crossover that's like a Nightfall that's specific to a character, I think we're going to see it in full in that character line. No proof on that, no confirmation from DC, but that is the case. Dana, I do not recall off the top of my head where Sea Devils was. I know we talked about it on the stream. Let me just bring up my my background sheet real quick and see if I can find that for you. But something I'm working with DC with to have, I guess, as a post poll thing, because we didn't do it for the actual poll, is sort of a reverse lookup where we could say like, ooh, Sea Devils. Oh yeah, we figured out where that could be. I off the top of my head, I am not sure. Dana, okay. Next, Hellblazer. And I think this takes some explanation. So the Hellblazer Omni line is poppin'. It's cruising. They seem to be releasing one per year. There's several more to go. That's great. And he has a 100% complete paperback line that went for 26 volumes. However, I think there's some incentive to do a redo on that for reasons. And here are the reasons. First of all, those paperbacks are only about 200 to 350 pages each. They're not that long. And so mostly any two of them could be one finest. So we already, like, the idea of like reprinting the paperbacks makes no sense because the finest are just such a better format just in terms of size factor and the ability to speedily release. So we could probably cover this whole thing in like 13, maybe 14 instead of 26. So that alone is attractive rather than going back to press on the paperbacks. The second thing is those paperbacks sometimes did not make perfect choices about where to collect his various additional materials. Sometimes it would make those choices based on like if there was other stuff by an author, or sometimes it felt like they would realize they'd missed something in a prior one and so then they put it into a next one. But now they have all that mapped, and clearly the omnibuses are jumping all around because they're based on creator names. So this would be a chance for them to just do, okay, here it is. It's the definitive in publication order Constantine. And finally, I think a good reason to do this is it doesn't have to go in order. So maybe they use this to maybe put out some stuff that's a few omnibuses away. Maybe they take advantage of this to release stuff from a really popular omnibus, like the Jamie Delano omnibus, in paperback. It allows them optionality. They don't have to go all in a row. They can kind of attack things in an order that complements the order that they are putting out the omnibuses. So actually, even though this has been so reprinted, and it's currently being reprinted, I think it would just be a good line. Now, selfishly, I also want it because I don't collect Hellblazer and Omnibus. I'm very tempted. They were in my in stock trades card at one point, but I don't love all of Hellblazer. Like sometimes I get really lost in an issue and sometimes I'm like, what is the point of this? Often I find that he's like, it's not as like sharp as I want it to be, which is a me problem, not a Hellblazer problem, because I come to Hellblazer with like preconceived notions of like what Hellblazer is and should be. So this is not just a selfish thing. I think actually it'd be a good idea. I think this is a character that eternally has legs. I think there's a really good interplay potentially between the Omnibus line and the DC Finest line. And I really think it would be a good idea. Drops of Saturn says, I need these in Finest so bad. The trades are so out of print. This would be my favorite format for Hellblazer, says Yarna Pulse. Chris Kaufman saying those Hellblazer paperbacks are so out of print. I hope DC does go with this line. It is pure money. This is what I mean. Like even though when something exists entirely in print, it kind of feels like, oh, we should be picking Blue Devil because Blue Devil's more obscure. There's a constant demand for Hellblazer. He, unlike Booster Gold, where there's a mild amount of interest, there is always interest in Hellblazer. And because those trade paperbacks are so short, this is really an opportunity to do something better and something that you can keep in print. Okay. Oh, and by the way, sorry, spoil that and then backtrack. But again, I do have a Hellblazer guide that I'm pretty confident is pretty complete. And so that box, the text is so small because I really do know what everything would be. That's everything that's been in all the paperbacks, but actually in your order instead of the order they were in the paperback. So we have a very good idea of what this could be. Okay. Now we come to Amethyst. Amethyst did well on the DC Tigereyes poll. However, I think that was a function of it being attractive to think about getting an omnibus for her because her material is so undercollected. She's only ever had a showcase and it didn't even get through all of this. And so the idea of an omnibus is often attractive to people when it can be done all in one, right? In the same way that I'm attracted to that in DC Finest. This would probably be, it maybe could be one finest, maybe two, but again, let's knock it out. Let's cross out a line. And again, I think DC Finest is the right format for this. All these people that are interested in Amethyst, who have like heard of her or read her a little bit in the revival that she had, recently at DC, well, recently, like 6 years ago now. I think paperback is the perfect low risk format to explore that in. And then if it sells really well, DC knows that the juice is there for an omnibus. I think she's a little too niche for her to get an omnibus right off the bat. And knowing that there's interest in an omnibus, I bet almost all of those people that want an omnibus would also buy this. But I'm interested in it too. I love female heroines that are title characters. I love kind of the fantasy realm. I've never read any of this material, and it's so fascinating to me that like she starts out in Legion, but then she's on Gemworld. Like, so is she in the future? Does her realm exist out of time? I don't know, because I've never read any of this material. So it's actually like really, really attractive to me to get it in this format. Suspicious Sludge, it's number 3, Edwin number 2, and Amethyst looks interesting, says Cedric and Ellen. I thought Amethyst would be in a sword and sorcery line. No, so we don't currently on the poll have a sword and sorcery line. There's the action adventure line, and many of the sword and sorcery things I've asked about seem like they might be bound for action adventure, but Amethyst is a title character that has like a whole book at least to herself, and I think DC has often been thinking about that way as one of their many metrics, is if the character has enough material that's not drawn throughout history, but like including 1 or 2 ongoing series that they can fill out at least 1 volume, then they probably work as a DC Finest volume. Many of you might leap to like, what about Hop Hannigan? I know that's somebody's particular favorite, but Hop Hannigan has no brand recognition, no modern runs, and the Hop Hannigan material was like anthologized through a bunch of different stuff over the years. Amethyst is a character that people have specific recollections of. She had 2 of her own ongoing series. We've seen her since Flashpoint, so I think that is the difference between them. Suspicious saying, I can't unsee. I don't know. Oh, with the left leg. Yeah, there's some interesting things happening on this cover. Amethyst has a cool connection to the Legion, which I am completely unaware of. Shanda Sook saying, do I trust someone named after a mineral? Well, I mean, I trust the crystal gems, so of course I would trust this Amethyst too. I just noticed, I did something a little different with eye makeup today, and there are some pluses and minuses about this makeup, but I think that actually turned out pretty well. Okay. More makeup review in the after party. By the way, the URL of the after party is in the description. So you might want to copy that now so that you can join the after party. Okay. We are the crystal gems. We always save the day. And if you think we can, we'll always find a way. That's one of those other vocal stems for me that every time it comes up, I just have to do it. Okay, my number 20 pick is Vigilante. I hoped that between the Marv Wolfman of it all and him being in the Peacemaker show that maybe we could get an omnibus of him, maybe alongside the Question omnibus that was happening, maybe alongside like the Hitman omnibus. It just felt like we're getting some omnibuses that like kind of felt like they were in the same zone as Vigilante, and maybe it was happening. I know there's going to be more Peacemaker, but it kind of feels like that moment in time. One moment in time has passed, and that's fine. I don't know if he quite has the juice for an omnibus, and honestly I think for people that are coming off the Peacemaker show getting a DC Finest, I bet this would probably sell almost as well as the Peacemaker volume, so DC has a comp for it. And so this could probably be out in 2 or 3 volumes. It's 50 issues. He does pop up in a couple other places, so it might be a little bit of a push to get it into 2, especially because he does have some later appearances as well. Oh, actually it is 3, because then he's got a 2005 series and a 2008 series. So it's kind of perfect. It would be 2 volumes for his original series. That would be 25 issues each, and then it'd be 1 volume for his post-2000 stuff. That would be 20-ish issues and some side appearances. Again, I love these 3-volume lines. It's perfect. Like, I think every year DC should add 2 or 3 3-volume lines. They should run for 3 years and then they should be done, and we can start crossing things off. Because honestly, if you look at that list of 100, a lot of them are not like 8 or 9 volume lines. A lot of them are really like 2 to 5 volume lines, and like the quicker we knock them out, the quicker we can like cover more of DC's history. Hell yeah, we need this, says Goody. Connor says Comic Vigilante is so cool. Sasmer says yes to Vigilante. I enjoyed the series back in the 80s. My number 5 pick. I actually have only ever read 1 issue of this because I just was like, what is it? And I read it and I was like, this is cool. Like, I like that he's kind of like a little bit of the Punisher, but he's a little bit more complicit in the problem than Punisher. And again, I've only ever seen 1 issue. Max is trying to bait me because we have a thing that if you've never seen the show Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the original YouTube it's on YouTube, and then Dropout has it too. And every episode of the original web series has a song. And Max and I have a rule that much like people will always watch Tom Holland doing the umbrella dance on the lip sync battle, if one of us brings up the word computery, we have to go and listen to this song. And I'm unhealthily obsessed with it, but you can't get me in the middle of a stream. Okay. Let's continue. Hard agree. A very satisfying read. Slasher would want this in Omnibus. Honestly, I think that 50 issues of it is perfect for Omnibus. And again, we've seen that Finest does not remove the ability for an Omnibus to happen. And sometimes it might inform DC that an Omnibus could happen. But then an Omnibus line wouldn't probably capture that 2000s era stuff, which a DC Finest line probably could. Okay, let's get into my top 20. You saw this on my Omnibus picks. It's Hawk and Dove, 1968 to 2011. Why? So despite spanning many decades as characters, they start in the 60s and they go all the way to 2011. Hawk and Dove actually does not have that much duo material on their own. It's really, they have their 60s miniseries, which is usually collected with Teen Titans, but I think would clearly be collected here because it's their actual title. Then they had a miniseries at the end of the 80s, and then we had a whole series of them in 1989, which probably would fit into one DC Finest. But then there's also an unrelated Hawk and Dove that has a series in 1997, but under the same title. And so we've seen DC Finest do that. It doesn't matter if it's different characters. If it's the same title, it'll go into the Finest. Then they make a few appearances in the 2000s. So this would not be a really long line. Again, this is a 2 or 3 line. And I really love the idea of that Hawk and Dove series because it's got early Rob Liefeld art, but it's all written by the Kessels pretty much entirely. And so it's like, I just like that it's just one series steered by one team. Derek Tyler just getting here. Not sure if I brought it up in regards to Vigilante, but the later issues of this go along with some of Kupperberg's Doom Patrol and set up Checkmate. Yeah, I knew that it was involved in Checkmate, and I couldn't remember exactly the why of it. So there would maybe be some additional issues in there, but with 3 volumes, probably it would work. Suspicious Sludvich, my problematic toxic burb duo. They try. Goody saying it's one of my blind spots. Well, you could be forgiven because none of it has ever really been printed. So yeah, okay. Here's the thing. I know, Ali Nazari, that you're passing because it's got Liefeld, but the writing was good. And Liefeld doesn't draw the whole thing, because then he fucks off to Marvel. Okay, my number 18 is Legion and Rebels, 1988 to 1996. And actually, that's a lie. It really goes all the way into 2009. So why? This anti-Lanterns, Lobo-adjacent, Legion of Superheroes precursor. It's a lot of things that it is almost. Like, it's almost a, like, repudiation of the Lanterns. It's almost a Lobo team book at points. It's almost like Legion of Superheroes the early years. It's never quite any of those 3 things. It's a deep cut. But it's a deep cut that I think what we've discovered on the Omnibus poll and even in the stream for announcing the possibilities of lines for DC Finest, that there's a lot of affection out there for, because people remember it from the 80s and 90s, and it was very long running. It spun out of the Invasion event. It had 70 issues of its own. Then it changed to Rebels and had another 20-ish issues. And then Rebels actually comes back for another run in the 2009, right up until Flashpoint. So that year range is incorrect. So this is not quite 3 volumes. They would need to tuck in and really lean into this at about 120 issues. This is like probably 4 or 5 volumes of material, but I think it's a little bit more obscure than some of these other picks. Actually, I think Vigilante is probably a better pick for the DC Finest line than this, but I selfishly would like to see this collected because it's so and under collected, and I always was interested in it. And one of my favorite tropes is a team book that doesn't cross over a lot, that kind of just keeps on trucking and being its own team. I love that. I love team titles, and I love being able to read a team title kind of like all on its own and just continuing to read it. So I think this would actually do surprisingly well on the poll. I mean, we'll see, but I think it would also do surprisingly well in sales. I think there's a lot of people who recommend it. Goody, I keep chatting it up. You have to think, I don't know it as much as you. A big thing on talking about DC is that I was not a DC reader in the 80s and 90s as much. So a lot of this is just me being curious about stuff and looking at their publishing history and being like, well, what are the gaps? What are the holes? What could we do? Let's continue, though, to my number 17 pick, JSA All-Stars. So I am desperate to see DC get more Golden Age material out now, while there's attention, while there's a line that is subsidizing it that people are interested in buying all of, while there's curiosity around it. And this did not come from me. This is one that DC was like, you should put this on the poll. It's called JSA All-Stars, and it would have potentially the same cast of characters that was featured in the JSA All-Stars archives, which there was only ever one volume of. So the thing is that some of these characters could maybe have their own DC Finest. Like Green Lantern technically is a JSA All-Star, but Green Lantern also has a Finest line. So I don't know how DC would do this in execution. Would they pull out Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, and other Spectre characters that could have their own DC Finest lines, or would they be duplicated? I think duplicating would be a terrible idea, because then people already have bought the material, and the Golden Age material is a hard sell. You do not want to be asking people to double dip on Golden Age material. So personally, if I was editing this line, I would take out everybody that has their own line. It's not like there's continuity between them. It's the Golden Age. And I would use this just to collect the people that almost certainly are not going to get their own line, or at least not their own Golden Age volume. Like Dr. Fate will get his own line. Is Dr. Fate going to get his own Golden Age volume? Probably not. But right now, it seems like Golden Age, Flash, and Green Lantern are on the table, so I wouldn't necessarily put them in this. But this would collect all those solo adventures of all those characters from the Golden Age, and we largely have not had it collected. So this would have to be heavily subsidized by the sale of other books, because this really will need some doing to collect. Mighty Futz saying, let's go, JSA All-Stars. Suspicious Sludge says, I will not trust this Hourman. He looks sussy. Derek Tyler saying, I didn't vote for this one this time around, but I would love to have this material. But that's okay, because Puddintain voted for it. One of my votes was for JSA All-Stars. I mean, this was really hard. I think I'm more excited about lines, voting for lines, than voting on titles, because I'm going to buy all the titles anyway, but lines is a chance to like get them to break new ground, and we only got 5 picks. It was brutal. Brutal. Okay, my number is 16. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a stream ever before. It's not an omnibus pick for me. It is Challengers of the Unknown from 1957 to 2004. So here's the thing. It is hard for me to think of a world where Challengers of the Unknown, I know it says Challenges, it's Challengers, has the sales support for omnibuses. I just don't think they ever do. I think they only got one DC Archives. But they had 2 black and white showcase volumes, and the showcase volumes do seem to be a helpful roadmap for the direction that DC is maybe thinking of going in with this DC Finest line. And the thing about Challengers of the Unknown is that they have a big batch of Silver Age material, which would still be a smallish omnibus, or maybe even 2, which we know is not going to happen. And then they also have a number of different reduxes that happen post-Krisis as well. And again, probably too disparate from each other to put into an omnibus. But that's what the DC Finest line is perfect for. And this is another 3-in-done book. Shockmaster General saying, this Challengers was my number 1. How about that? Edwin Billion wants to see these stories for historical sake. And that's the thing. I don't really know a whole lot about this group, except for, honestly, what I read about them very recently in DC All In, when they were kind of part of the whole lore of the Unlimited Justice League. But I like that they are regular humans. Actually, Christopher Cantwell did a great job of retelling their origin, such as it is in the modern day. But they're all regular humans that have been through peculiar experiences. And so now they're kind of like a Fantastic Four that doesn't have powers, right? Like, what if there was a Fantastic Four with all of the similar kind of like science and investigation interest and remit and skills of the Fantastic Four, but they weren't stretchy and invisible and rocky and on fire? That's kind of what Challengers of the Unknown is. And to me, this just feels like it's never going to get collected. Otherwise, it's never been comprehensively collected. But in a DC Finest line, people are aware of the name. This is not so obscure at DC that people don't know what Challengers is or what they did or what they are. So I think to put this in Finest, it would do fine. It's not going to do numbers like the biggest ones, but I think it'll probably do as well as certainly as well as Blue Beetle, I think, or maybe even as well as maybe not quite as well as Hawkman. I think probably around Blue Beetle, Metamorpho, it's kind of at that level of people are aware of it, and it has the pull of having never really been collected before. Cool cover choice. The only Challengers of the Unknown I've read is in the Swamp Thing issues in the Bronze Age Omnibus, which again, my little box at the bottom is not necessarily comprehensive. I think you probably would pull a couple of issues of them appearing in Swamp Thing, but yeah, I think that this is the main stuff, and people really loving the cover. So very, very cool. Dana adding, a lot of the Challenger stories by Kirby are inked by Wally Wood. Okay, let's continue to my number 15 pick. Again, something you have never heard me talk about before, which is Adam Strange. To me, I almost went rogue and put this in my top 5. To me, this is the perfect thing to be in DC format. He is a well-known character. He has a Silver Age omnibus, but I don't think it was the biggest seller, and it's kind of awkward to think about covering all of the rest of his material in omnibus, because I think his Silver Age stuff has a certain pedigree that not all of his other material does. And he's been through a lot of different stuff. He's been in Showcase, he's been in Mystery in Space, he's been in Strange Adventures, he had some key Justice League stories, he was in World's Finest. That's fine for an omnibus, but to me, a DC Finest is perfect for that kind of thing. It's kind of like the Peacemaker DC Finest, where it's like, follow this character wherever they go, get them all into one book, put it in a coherent order, let us see how this character evolved, how different creators used him in different way, how his personality grew. And there's a lot of material, and it just would be super awkward to, I mean, it would fit into omnibuses. The omnibuses are in the omnibus poll, but to me, this is a slam dunk DC Finest for me. And it's not a quick and done line, but he's one of those characters, kind of like Booster Gold, kind of like Hawkman, where like everybody who reads DC is aware of who he is. He had a big role to play in the 2000s era DC, and there's just no good paperback collections to go for and pick up. I never know if it's I Am Space Money or Lamb Space Money Monkey, because it's hard to tell in this font. You have to tell me which it is. But either way, pardon me, saying give me all of the Adam Strange. Dr. Zero loves the Silver Age Omnibus. I've actually read this run, says Ali Nazari. The art is really good. First met Adam Strange in 52. I love him in that comic. Who did that comic? This is, I believe, Andy Kubert shortly before he's drawing X-Men at Marvel, I want to say. Yeah, I mean, this is not the typical image I think of when I see Adam Strange. I usually think of him in that very kind of like glossy, like adorable, almost animated look that he had in the Silver Age that I think many people drew him in. And I there must be some Darwin Cook version of him that's fixed in my brain. Maybe he did the cover of the omnibus or something. But when I saw this, I'm like, oh, to me, this is like what having the Adam Strange book offers. And if you've ever read the Tom King Strange Adventures series, which is all about Adam Strange and Mr. Terrific, and it's Black Label, so it's not necessarily in continuity, although it could be in continuity. I don't know. But it's quite sinister, and some people really were upset at what it did to Adam Strange and kind of like the direction Tom King took it in. But I think there's always that intergalactic empire, Star Warsy betrayal stuff baked in the background of the Adam Strange material, even when it's like lighter and more frivolous. And I think this cover in particular was like, oh wow, yeah, like that definitely it is like representative of that. There's different layers to Adam Strange that I think people aren't always aware of. Yeah, Ali Nazri, I agree. It might be as canonical as Mr. Miracle. I just don't know if we've had confirmation of that. I like the way I have Adam Strange laid out. I enjoyed his post-crisis stories. And again, that's not necessarily the break between the volumes. It's just because there's so many things. I didn't want to make bullets of every single thing. There's kind of like 3 chunks. And I got that deluxe edition they did of Planet Heist recently, and that's a really cool story. Andy Kubert is one of my favorites. The earlier we go on Andy Kubert, the more I like him. I'm pretty deep into Andy Kubert in the 90s right now, because we're in 1996 in our X-Men read, and I'm kind of over it at this point. He had such a weird way of drawing faces. I would love to try to do my makeup one day to look like an Andy Kubert face. He had such a specific way of doing faces. And okay. Hold on. We have an official report. Breaking news. I am Space Money. Well, that makes sense, and I probably will remember it now. Let's keep going to number 14, All-Star Squadron. So this is one that I know is really popular. It was number 8 in the omnibus poll 2 years in a row. I am not so interested in buying an omnibus of this. I don't need an omnibus of the retcon adventures of DC superheroes during World War II. That said, I have read some of this material because they do have an All-Star Squadron guide. The material's really good. I know we talk about this ad nauseum on the polls every time it comes up, so I'm not going to go over it in full, but like the reason people are mad for it is not only because it's from a period they all have nostalgia for, but because it was good comics. It was really good 1980s comics. And for me, I might not want to buy it in omnibus, but I absolutely do want it on my shelf. And so I think it's very attractive to have this. Now, I will give an explanation that I tried to give in the poll screen, and honestly, I find this to be the most confusing thing DC said to me at any point in working on this with them. They said, there are some characters that are unique to the All-Star Squadron that are not in the JSA, even though most of the All-Star Squadron is from the JSA. And in as much as those characters don't have their own lines and are not in the JSA, it's possible that eventually DC could do a Golden Age volume labeled as All-Star Squadron, but from the actual Golden Age that would have the solo stories of those characters, since they would not be JSA All-Stars. That's too much for my feeble little brain as a relatively novice on DC compared to the Marvel side. I mean, I know a lot about DC, but not like I do about Marvel. I was like, sure, It says 1981 because I think if we put 1940, people were going to get confused, and then they were going to be like, so does it have JSA? This I can tell you for sure. DC thinks about this as a separate line from the JSA. They are two different DC finest lines. I heard that sentence in specific from them, and I'm not telling tales out of school here. It's on the poll that way for a reason. So this is different from the JSA line because this is retcon World War II stories of the JSA characters and others. So if it's a retcon World War II story of the All-Star Squadron, it would go into this one, and I would like to have it. So there it is. Superjob says, I'm not the biggest Roy Thomas fan, so this would be low on my list. Is an All-Star Squadron where Power Girl was introduced? Yes. And Power Girl, another thing DC was quite specific about, I kept saying that Power Girl volume shouldn't start in 2005. It should start earlier. She had sold material earlier. And DC said, cool your jets, Krisis. At that time, she was a JSA character. And so or maybe she was an all-star. She's a JSA character. Or she's an all-star squad. Whatever character she was, that's where it would be. Okay. Yes, that's kind of what I'm saying, but I'm saying I don't think it would be called All-Star Squadron All-Stars. I think it would just be like a Golden Age volume. It would just be called like Before the Squadron or something. I don't know. That's how I understand it anyway. DC, I'm so sorry if I'm misinterpreting your words. That was the most confusing conversation we ever had. Okay, next, another one I've never had the chance to talk about before because I don't give a shit about Batman in oversized format, but I actually want this pretty bad, which is The Outsiders. So The Outsiders begins in the Bronze Age, which a lot of you don't have an awareness of these 1980s comics because they've never been reprinted, only a little bit. Finally, the Justice League omnibus line is that far. But Batman at one point is like, F this Justice League noise, because he wanted to be like a little bit more interventionist. He wanted to be a little bit more X-Force-y and take the ends justified the means into his own hands, and the League wasn't down with that. So he literally finds a bunch of outsiders, a bunch of randos who like don't have a team, and he's like, what if you're my team and do exactly what I tell you to do? And of course that results in some conflicts. So this is really cool because it's kind of like it's like Batman's got like a second, it's like he's two marriages. He's got a wife in another town, and he's like a traveling salesman, and he's like, I'll see you later, JLA, I'm going on a trip. And then he like goes and he's like with the outsiders, not really because he deliberately quits the JLA for the outsiders, but it's always been funny to me because it's kind of like he keeps this team very much at arm's length from the other thing that he's doing. And then eventually the team puts Batman at arm's length to them. And then this brand really sustains. So this is not one of my 3 and done lines. This would need to go on for a while. There's an original Batman and the Outsiders series that maybe would fit into One's Finest. I think it's a little too long, honestly. Then there is Adventures of the Outsiders without Batman. Then the Outsiders relaunch in 1985, and they have another whole like Finest length series. Then they disappear for a while, but they come back out of Titan's Young Justice graduation day in the 2000s, and then they have another 50 issue run, and then they have another 39 issue run. So I mean, just back a napkin, that's probably 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 omnibus or DC Finest of this. And again, probably none of it has the name power to be an omnibus, except for maybe that initial Batman stuff. But I don't think they would put that out as an omnibus until they got that far in the Batman Bronze Age line. Because why would you want like the Outsiders and not Batman? I guess you could see it as a companion to Justice League in that period. So that makes a certain amount of sense. But I actually really think that like it would be a long time before we saw it in omnibus. And then the Winnick stuff, which is the later part of this, which we did see on the DC omnibus poll. But it's like at the point that there's 7 volumes and it's a team book, and there's not a lot of team ones now. Basically, I mean, DC's not as thick with teams as Marvel. So we've got Doom Patrol, we've got Suicide Squad, we've got Justice of League of America, we've got Justice Society of America, we've got Legion of Superheroes. I just think that there's another team to put in the mix, and since it does need 7 or 8 volumes, it's kind of like the sooner we start it, the better. Batman's Personal Strike Force. This was good stuff. Dr. Zero saying, I'm missing the 3rd volume of the hardcover. Joe Cole saying, excusez-moi, but in a world where much is being collected, we need the Outsiders as a Finest. It doesn't hurt to have Jim Aparo on art. Batman actually having friends, and Katana trying to raise this weird little alien girl was fun to read. Yeah, that's the thing. Batman actually had a relationship with this that was not just a relationship of equal standing of the heavy hitters of the Justice League. Like, he actually had an emotional connection to some of these characters, and I clearly have read some of this stuff, and so I find this actually really entertaining and I actually really kind of like it. Yes. Okay, let's continue because we're almost in my top 10. Then we're going to switch back to the other half. Resurrection Man. This is tricky because it's only 27 issues in a 1 million issue, which is like just on the verge of fitting into one finest. But then there's some other stuff that you would need as well, including some body double stuff. So I think this is actually 2 slim finest, and it would actually kind of be Resurrection Man and the body doubles. Here's the thing. DC missed a chance to get this out while that Ram V series was running. Everybody was so interested in it. Ram V always brings eyes and attention to things. And they didn't get a book out, which was like so annoying. That was the time. Now, there have been whispers that Ram V might come back and do more of that. So like, please, DC, strike while the iron is hot. This has never been comprehensively collected. It's got Abnett and Lanning writing. It's got Butch Goose, but I don't know. God rest his soul. He was an amazing artist, one of my favorites. And he's no longer with us. But so I'm not trying to make fun of his last name. I truly don't know how to say it. I love this material, and you know that I love this material, and I really think that people would enjoy this material, and there's room in the DC Finest line for obscure stuff, and just the label of it being DC Finest is going to sell like a few hundred more copies than if this was just Resurrection Man on its own. So like, that is a good reason to get it out. I really know nothing about this Da Vinci Man, but I would still like to learn. Just in time saying, yes, yes, yes. My number one in both polls. Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire. Resurrection Man. Jason is saying, my number one, Krisis Resurrection Clan membership card getting revoked for being so low on the list. Look, I had to make priorities. It was hard. It was hard. We only had 5. Okay. I think for me, I didn't put it as high because since it only needs 1 or 2 volumes, and since it's kind of niche, I do think that they should just wait until it's coming out next in current continuity, whether that's Ram V for Black Label or he joins a team or something. I think anytime that there's something like Peacemaker that it's really just 1 or maybe 2 volumes, I do think it pays to time it to some current interest in it. And since this is only 1 or 2 volumes, that's why I wouldn't say dice, but with a G. Butch Geis. Okay. Now we know. Let's continue to my number 11, and then we will switch back to my top 11 lines or volumes. The Ray. Now, this was on my omnibus poll as well. The more and more I research this and read issues and page through it on DC Finest, the more and more hype I get. I really think that this is kind of like the lost companion to Starman, and it's crazy to me that DC has not treated it the same way. I know Starman, James Robinson, award-winning, blah, 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 but like, this is a very similar pedigree in a very similar series, and it had early Joe Quesada art. Now, here's the thing. To me, this actually feels a little bit more like a compendium than a DC Finest, because they don't really need to do the Golden Age Ray material, and as a compendium, it's the perfect size. It's like 30 issues of the actual series, 6 issues of a mini-series before, a Green Lantern plus the Ray issue, and 1 issue of Action Comics. That's like a perfect, tidy size compendium, but it's a little bit too big for one Finest. But since the Ray is not a big name seller on his own, a compendium, some people buy all the compendiums, but I think there's more of a built-in audience that's like the floor that will buy every single DC Finest. So I think if they could find a way to make this material work across 2 volumes, it would be better in the Finest. And they can do that because they have the Golden Age material of his, I think it's his father or his uncle or something. Anyway, but that they could put in there as well. So I just think I now that DC is finally digging into the 90s. So long their 90s material has been so ignored, especially the first half of the 90s. If it wasn't, even Batman wasn't really super well collected up until Nightfall. I mean, they had those separate Dark Knight Detective and Cape Crusaders trades, but I just think I really want to see them tackle this, and I really want to see it in Finest, and it's one of those ones that I think that people will really decide that they will love it. Ali Nazari asking, is he an LGBTQ character in the comics or just in the Arrow show? I actually don't know. I don't know. If anybody knows, please chime in. And that brings us to the end of that half. So now let's switch back to my top wanted volumes. Now we got 8 votes on these, so the first 3 that I'm going to get back to here are a little bit below the vote threshold, and then we're going to get into the vote threshold. So here's my number 11. It is Batgirl Cassandra Cain, 2002 to 2008, the stuff that comes after the book that we have. So as I said earlier, I am interested in that first Cassandra Cain volume. That would be volume 1, but it's kind of like it's been collected before. It's going to duplicate No Man's Land. I want it to close off the period, but it's not one of my top ones. The stuff that comes after this book, is a top priority for me because I know people really want it badly. I want to be able to read all of it. I want to see it comprehensively collected. I want to see this period closed off. It kind of ticks all my boxes, right? And it seems like Batgirl is a pretty popular, pretty strong seller for DC. If the end, I mean, I think that this has already been back to print once. It's hard to tell with DC Finest because DC just kind of like stealth restocks things. But I always wonder if it was number one in the omnibus poll. Did that mean anything? Like, does it sell as well as Batman for DC? I think it's doing pretty well, and I think she's pretty popular. And since there's no omnibus seemingly forthcoming, it seems like this is a chance to really keep moving through. Richard B saying, here's the one that I voted for. Yarny Poll saying, only 11. This is the highest priority, Krisis. Andre Odevuda saying, I live a few miles from the birthplace of Captain Kirk. Well, that was a non sequitur. And Jamie C saying, second Batgirl choice means a second time for me to say this is my favorite Bat-related run. I don't make the rules. It was so close to my top 8, but when you see what's in my top 8, I think hopefully you'll forgive me. Okay, let's continue to my number 10, Batman, the Bronze Age. So here's the thing. We are getting the Bronze Age Batman Omnibus at the same time that we're getting DC Finest. So the Omnibus is very quickly going to move past the Finest, but I still think there's value in getting out both. They're probably going to have exactly the same contents as each other, but the Finest will just not quite keep pace with the Omnibuses because the Omnibuses will be a little bit bigger. I think that's fine. It's Batman. It's material that's always been hotly demanded. I don't buy Batman in oversized, so for me personally, I would rather have it in DC Finest. And whenever I've gone to any of the 70s material of Batman, I actually really love it. Like, it turns out that 70s Batman is like super, super up my alley. So the only reason I really actually want this pretty bad, and it's something I probably will really sit down and read pretty soon after it arrives, but because we're also getting in an omnibus, I just could not quite put it in my top 8 because it's like, we're getting it in another format. We already know it's coming. We know that DC really pays attention to their omnibus lines of the Bronze Age once they start them. So I just couldn't give it one of my actual like ranked votes on the poll. Yarna Paul saying, I think I'm getting both bronze Batmans. Cedric saying, those I would buy, but I did pre-order the omnibus. Number 3, sorry, I just clicked it and then it ran away. Cruel Angel was number 3, Saz Murph number 1, and James reminding you that the description for the after party is in the description. Yeah, there's the covers in this period are on fire. Drops of Saturn saying, I don't want to buy too many omnibuses, but I do like the new paper stock. It's so nice and lightweight, and I genuinely don't know. Yeah, for me, it's an easy choice. Since I don't do oversized Batman, I'm like, give it to me in Finest. Okay, number 9, missing my actual ranked votes by 1. Green Lantern post-crisis Green Lantern Core. What this means is that there's a number of different Green Lantern things happening after that volume that we're getting, setting up shop. I don't think we have it yet. No, it's still to come. But that comes before Emerald Dawn. And I think that this little remainder period has never been comprehensively collected. It's never been kind of presented all in one place. It lets us, DC confirmed that they do think of that New Guardians book as part of this. So it'd be a chance to get all of New Guardians collected. And the Action Comics weekly stories of Green Lantern, Hal Jordan would probably be in this as well. I know it's weird seeing me have Hal Jordan high on a poll, but it just feels like for as important as Green Lantern is as a character for DC, this is one of those like weird, that period right around Crisis is so weird because like some things were pre-Crisis and some things were post-Crisis. Green Lantern actually held on to a lot of its pre-Crisis continuity without a ton of changes, and it just feels like this is this weird remainder that it would be so easy to just take care of a Finest that would be really hard to sell in any other format because like what is it even? It's like such a strange collection of stuff. I just think it would be so cool to get this and to just be done with it. So Richard saying setting up shop is at the end of September. Okay, now we're going into my top 8. This is what I'm actually ranking when after the show I'm going to sit down and make my vote on the poll, and this is what I will be putting on the poll. My number 8 pick is Aquaman, the Silver and Bronze Age. I really like Aquaman, and I know Aquaman keeps getting better from what we have in this first Aquaman volume, The King of Atlantis, which I think is actually pretty cool. It has some really fun art. It has some really cool adventures. But I know that actually the Aquaman that people really consider to have like a serious pedigree is Aquaman that comes later. Now, we've had some of this collected before in hardcovers. I forget if they're oversized or not. But because some of these runs that he has in the Bronze Age are actually so significant and beloved, especially the stuff with Mara, that actually it has been collected before, but never in a comprehensive no skips way, never all in a single line. And I just think that now that we've awakened that Aquaman, we should just keep pushing. And it's not going to take a lot of volumes to get through this. And he's generally seen as kind of a softer seller in omnibus, so or just in collection as general, but the DC Finest line kind of props that up and gives interest in everybody having it. So for me, this is a really high priority. I kind of hemmed and hawed. There's so many books I want badly. In terms of things that I like really would want to push to the front of the line, this is one of those books. I would push it all the way to the front of the line. Evan saying it's my number one. Edwin Billiot saying Aquaman Bronze Age has Jim Aparo and Don Newton art. Great stories. Yeah, the art is really, really good. In the Bronze Age, Dr. Zero saying my number 3. Your Honor Paul saying number 5. Connor wants to own this so badly. I just think, and again, because it doesn't feel like an Aquaman Silver and Bronze Age omnibus line is coming to us anytime soon, especially because they got those few hardcovers out of the bronze stuff. It's like, this is a perfect thing to cover in DC Finest. I just think it's absolutely perfect. Look, Aquaman has bigger fish to fry, says Superjob. I love this cover. There's a lot of great covers on this run. It was really hard to pick, but this one was just so entertaining to me. Okay, so that will be my number 8. And the way this works is just like the omnibus poll. So your number 8 gets 1 point, your number 7 gets 2 points, your number 1 gets 8 points. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to rank them in order, but they are weighted in the voting. So this only gets 1 point for me, but I had to throw it a point. My number 7 is Golden Age Flash. It is insane to me that we have never collected much Golden Age Flash. Jay Garrick, I think it's time. And if you get one message from me on this whole stream, it is that I really feel that DC Finest is our chance to put a few Golden Age books from a few titles other than Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman on the schedule each year and to see people support them. And honestly, I think there's a lot more potential support for this than anybody realizes. I think people love Jay Garrick because he's what birthed the Crisis on Multiple Earths. He's what birthed the idea of the DC multiverse. He's always been there in Flash comics. So I think unlike a lot of the other Golden Age heroes that like don't continue through to be the same character the way Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman does, Jay Garrick is even unique from them because he does continue to be his own character. He's still around today, and he's been in the JSA, he's been in Flash, and he's beloved. So I really think that this is our chance. I think some of the art that I've seen in brief excerpts from all these books is like so beautiful. I just want this so bad. I'm so excited for it. Yes, I want this so badly. Jay is the greatest of all time. Such Suspicious Sledge is saying this is my number 4. I Am Space Monkey saying number 6 for me. A lot of people seem really excited for this. And I originally thought it might get its own line. If you look at the DC Finest sheet or past version of the sheet, I had that as the Flash Jay Garrick because I really didn't think DC was going to stretch back for characters that were different characters under the same mantle. DC disabused me of that notion in a second when we started talking. They're like, it's all one Flash line. All Flashes matter. So now I know, and Edwin Billiot says deserves printing. He was number 3. He was in 3 books in the Golden Age. And that's the thing. This is going to be an intense amount of content. But at the point that we got a Plastic Man line to start in the Golden Age, surely we can start a Flash line. Again, Jay Garrick, probably the most recognized Golden Age character that isn't like the same as it's not the same. It's like a legacy hero. He's got to be the most, plus he was on the Flash show. Like, I just think people know who he is and they would buy them. Dr. Zero saying, give me 3 to 5 Golden Age DCFs a year. Yeah, I think there's probably an equation that DC is working out where they know how many they can get away with. And they probably want to balance that with Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman 2 and JSA. So there's probably like a limited amount of spots. But for me, the older the material and the more that it's a first time collection of material, the more excited I am. Okay, that was my number 7. My number 6 pick is another Golden Age pick. It is Green Lantern Alan Scott. This is so undercollected. And I get, again, he's known. He's still in the comics. Now he's a queer icon in the comics. Let's go back and read the stuff. And also, like, Green Lantern was such a different thing in the Golden Age because it didn't come with all of the lore that Green Lantern came with, starting from his reinvention in the Silver Age. So it is reading like a very different kind of character, which I think is a plus and a minus. As a plus, it's like, wow, this is unlike any other Green Lantern material. As a minus, it doesn't have the whole space core, aspect of the Green Lantern. I just remain so interested in this, not just because he's a gay character now, but because I just want it. I want to be able to sit down and read it. I want it to be available in DC Universe. I want it on my bookshelf. I just think this is our chance. The Green Lantern's a huge seller for DC. He probably sells as much or better than Wonder Woman. He's got a compendium line right now, and the compendium line means we don't have to worry about getting to 2000s era Green Lantern and Finest anytime soon, because the compendiums are selling like hotcakes. They've been back to press. So that really allows us to focus on past parts of Green Lantern, and we've seen a lot of Green Lantern live already. We've got a 1960s volume, then we have, you know, his Hard Traveling Hero stuff, which has been an omnibus. Now the Finest line is getting there too. We've seen like a mid-80s one as well. I just think for a character and a line that's as popular and sustainably popular for DC as Green Lantern, it's kind of wild to me that there are so many gaps both in the Golden Age and in the 80s, and one of my top wishes for DC Finest is to let's see DC close those gaps. Ali Nasri saying created by Bill Finger. It's more mystical than sci-fi. And Ali, I think that's like one of the reasons it's so interesting to me. Nicole is saying it's my most wanted Green Lantern materially for sure. Oh, hey, he's a bigger priority for you too, Richard B. says, get me them Bill Finger comics. Edwin Billion saying Golden Age Green Lantern is a queer character with a weakness to wood, not my joke. Love seeing the JSA related picks, saying Evan. My number 2 pick, I read the recent Alan Scott mini. Oh, just in time. That Alan Scott mini was one of the best series that's come out from any publisher in years. I was completely enraptured. For anybody who liked the Snagglepuss DC book, where Mark Russell kind of recasts Snagglepuss as this kind of like queer cartoon of the 1960s, the Alan Scott book kind of does that, where it looks back at his Golden Age adventures, but from a modern perspective and kind of a throughout his history perspective, to kind of fill in the gaps of queerness, and it shows him kind of being out and then going back into the closet, and it threads so perfectly with his Golden Age material that I would probably actually buy that trade, which, you know, I don't buy a lot of modern trades because why would I? But it's like so perfectly interwoven with his Golden Age material and so like reverent of it that I think it would be really cool to shelve them side by side. I am Space Monkey saying didn't get my moat, but the more Golden Age the better. And Lance Library had no idea that Bill Finger was involved. Now we're into my top five. My number 5 most wanted volume range in DC Finest is more Green Lantern. Is this the real Krisis? Have I been replaced by a pod person? Well, here's the thing. I value the DC Finest line for what it can achieve, what it can cover that we might not be able to get in Omnibus or might not see in any other format. And post-Krisis Green Lantern feels like something we can achieve here. You saw it, that was in my Omnibus picks too, and you see that it does well in the Omnibus poll. But here's the thing about that. 2 things. One, we know that there is a creator on here that we don't really want to see credited, and DC probably doesn't want to give him royalties. Marvel won't even put his single issues by him into a bigger Omnibus. DC Finest kind of takes the weight off of that a little bit because he's not the only person credited in the book. In fact, for Green Lantern, the other thing that this does is I went back and forth with DC several times, and DC seems like at this time, the way they might be thinking about it is that the DC Finest line would act just like the DC Compendiums, and if it's got a lantern in it, it's in the line. Does that include John Stewart and Mosaic? Probably. Does that include all of Guy Gardner? I am skeptical because I feel like that should be its own Finest line, but DC is like, yeah, he's a lantern. Why wouldn't it be? That's not decided because we need to see one of these come out before we know. But DC seems like open to the idea that, so would this also include Dark Stars? Like it might include all that. They're Green Lantern Quarterly. And the more lantern stuff we put into this, the more it dilutes that one creator being so much of it, although he did write some of the other stuff as well. So it feels like a really unique opportunity that there's no other line to do this in other than Compendium. And honestly, if DC just decided that Green Lantern's like the way to do post-Krisis Green Lantern's Compendium, and once they're done with the Jeff Johns Compendiums, they just reach back and start doing this in Compendium, sold. It's so undercollected, and it's undercollected because of that one person, but there's so much important establishing stuff for Hal and Hal's downfall, for John Stewart coming into his own as a solo hero, for Guy Gardner being a bastard. All of that exists here, and it's crazy to me that there's no way to buy it. Not only no way to buy it, but it's not even on DC Infinite. That is insane. It is time to put it together, and we have a unique opportunity in DC Finest to make it happen. Edward Dawn was my number 1 vote, says Pudding Tame. Goody saying Mosaic is such an odd Vertigo-esque series. Planet says I fell in love with Green Lantern this year after ignoring him for decades. bring it. The big question is Dark Stars. Yeah, because Jon Stewart doesn't join Dark Stars for like 18 or 19 issues. So like, do you still put those first 18 issues in the line? I don't know. Lansing, I want this material too. Hopefully that creator gets nothing from this. Logan Wayne wasn't kidding. This is so different from the top of my most wanted Omni choices, right? Because for me, since I buy all Finest, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to buy all of them. So what do I want to jump to the front of the line? If DC said, hey, thanks for working on the poll, you get to jump these people to the front of the line, which to be clear, they did not say. Here's who I would jump to the front of the line. Your polls, I don't know. I think DC's got to take the plunge eventually on this material. I think Finest is safer than Omnibus, because if there's a ton of outcry or if like people don't want to buy it, and Omnibus is a big money commitment, a DC Finest, so they never reprint it. Oh well, we've seen plenty of Marvel Epics that have never been reprinted. So for me, a DC Finest feels so much less high risk for giving it a chance. And so, and Ollie's got, this is my point entirely. This is what made, oh no, sorry, they could maybe erase his name. Goody has my point entirely. This is what made me a lifelong fan of Green Lantern. Like, this was the Green Lantern establishing run for so many people, because it was the post-crisis run, and it's like so insane that there's no way to read it or collect it. It's just crazy, 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 crazy. And again, with the temptation, anytime there's a line that is going to be comprehensive, my ears perk up, my nipples get hard. And so X-Men Blue and Gold, Batman Post-Crisis DC Finest, anytime we're threading to get Krakoa omnibuses, anytime anybody at Marvel or DC or any publisher out there is going to sit down and do the good mapping and the good reading order stuff and then give us a book in that perfected way, yeah, that's how I feel about it. And this is a chance. It's a chance to get that. Max said, you had me at nipples. All right, here's my top 4. Number 4, Catwoman, Post-Crisis, pre-Brewbreaker. We're already 2 books deep into this, but Catwoman ran for kind of a long time. We're going to need at least another 2. I think it might actually be another 3, because it runs the issue, I want to say, like, it's in the 989 or 90s, and we're only up to 32 here, because you do need some Batman crossover stuff, and she does appear in some other places sometimes. So I think that's 3, maybe even 4 more books. And here's the thing, the Brubaker material has been really well collected. They did a series of comprehensive trades. There's an omnibus, then I think they redid those trades. There have been many opportunities to buy that. So I don't know that this line has to continue collecting sequentially right through that, although honestly, it's very popular material and it's been a while since we've had it reprinted. But I just think, especially for this latter material in the Catwoman series from the 1990s, it's never been comprehensively collected. I always thought that they would do it in a compendium, because there's just so much of it, and Nightwing got a compendium and Robin got a compendium. It would have been much faster than this, but DC said Finest, and I'm in. I just think that I love seeing this stuff finally collected. I think there's so much fun Selena Kyle material, and I think people getting to read this 90s material, which I am pretty familiar with, is going to show how many possibilities with Catwoman that we're kind of like ignoring in the modern era. She's a fun character. She should be doing fun things. She should be, I think we sometimes take her too seriously. She should be doing heists. I think even as a good guy, there's room for her to do fun, pulpy stuff. And I think that at the best parts of future runs, people have been reminded of and also have run with that. So Jim Balent art, I don't know. Universe saying, well, that's a cover. I just loved her silhouetted by the bat signal. This was my number 5. Loving this line so far. Balent's art is so 90s. Lance the Library saying, I'm eager to see Catwoman collect all of the Balent era material. I love Jim Balent's Catwoman, says Cedric and Ellen. I'm not sure how good this is, but I'm here for it, says Goody. So there you go. This is Webswinger is looking for Nightwing to be my top 3, but Nightwing does not have a DC Finest line yet. So he cannot be in my top volume ranges picks, because he wasn't in the volume ranges side of the poll. He's on the lines side of the poll. All right. Are you ready for my top 3 most wanted? Jump it in line. Give it to me now. DC Finest volume ranges. And then we'll get back to my top 10 lines. Number 3, Silver Age and Bronze Age Hawkman. We know that I am more than Hawk curious. I'm pretty Hawk attracted at this point. And we have this, which covers from 1961 to 1966. That's a huge chunk of Hawkman, but there's a lot more Silver Age and Bronze Age Hawkman to go. He did have some showcase volumes. We've never had this stuff in color. And actually, I'm not picky or choosy about this because I want all of it eventually. This could continue all the way through Krisis, which means all of that great Jenny Blake Isabella material that's in the early 80s, the Hawkman War and all that stuff before Hawkworld, that could all be in this range too. And none of it's super long. Like, it's going to take us a few finest, but this is a chunk that I really, really want to see them collect. I love it. I love how every single cover is funnier than the last. They're all so campy. It's all him, like he's under the paw of a giant cat. He's wrestling giant white birds. Like, every single cover is like everything you could possibly want from a Silver Age cover from Hawkman. Joe Kubert, Hawkman, let's go. Hawkman Silver and Bronze was my number 3 as well. Twinsies, says Murph. Suspicious Sledgefish saying, caw, my number 1. Dr. Zero saying my number 2 pick. I love this. Love this. Goody says I went with Post-Crisis Hawkman, which is my number 1, Hawkworld in particular, which I love. I think that hopefully, I have no sales data. I really hope that first Hawkman did well. And I hope that DC sees that there's potential demand for this because I want it. And also, I think he's a character that's like more popular than they maybe have realized because all they've ever done is put out that one omnibus of Jeff Johns' Hawkman, which is like fine. But I think if they get to the right format and price point, which I think DC Finest is for him, they're going to find that there is just so much more to think this whole comic is based on that one YouTuber. I love Hickey Pop Comics on YouTube. Please go subscribe to his channel. I think he is making some of the most brilliant, funny, watchable comics content of anybody on YouTube. And it's so personable too. And he is a huge Hawkman fan. And if this comes out, then I get to have him on the channel to talk about Hawkman. Okay, let's talk about my top 2. Oh, goody. We all know that I'm obsessed with the Robert Venditti Hawkman run. Highly recommended. If you haven't read it, anybody who doesn't know the 2018 Hawkman series, you don't need to know anything about it. You don't need to do any pre-reading. It assumes you just think Hawkman is confusing and it just takes you on a journey. And I think it's an amazing comic. Highly recommended. And here's that Higgy Pop YouTube channel that I love. He often dresses as and appears as Hawkman in his videos. And I'm obsessed with him. He just thinks I'm like, he doesn't know me from Adam. Like, he doesn't know that I have this big website or what, like, whatever. I'm just a person, right? He just knows me as this random commenter on his channel. He's like, thanks for stopping by, Krisis. I don't think he has any idea my like obsession level with him and that I'm talking about him on every stream and that I'm on the Near Mint Condition Discord every time one of his videos comes out, being like, guys, there's a new Iggy Pop video. Drop everything you're doing. We need to go watch Iggy Pop. I think I may be his number 1 super fan. Okay. Number two. You're going to be shocked. My number 2 DC Finest Most Wanted is Batman Post-Crisis era. And I know I don't collect Batman in oversize, so you don't usually hear me talking about this, but like, come on. It's Batman. It's Batman in perfect order. It's Batman with every in-continuity series integrated. Like in that one that we just got that had the cult in it. Like, oh my gosh, that's what we want. Like, we want perfected Batman. Get us all the way to Nightfall. Do it, DC. Do it. And then you can keep printing all these things forever because there's always going to be interest in this. You know, finish out the chunk, then do Nightfall next or not. Who cares? Just get us there. Get us there because this has the opportunity to collect so much stuff that's not collected. This is a book I actively read, that I actively enjoy. It actually has, I think we determined it just caught up to where I am in my read. So like the next one that comes out, I'll be able to read in physical format instead of in digital. And I think this goes to show, I was having a conversation on the DC Finest Discord about this, which, by the way, shout out to everybody in the DC Finest Discord who've been so fun in giving me some suggestions as we were putting together the poll and then in talking about the polls that's been running. I think it's different than Marvel, where there's such a huge amount of X-Men fans that only care about X-Men. They're like, X-Men are nothing, see ya. And I think there's the same for Spider-Man fans at Marvel too. And so those books always do well in polls, they always sell well, but sometimes it kind of feels like X-Men and Spider-Man are in their own universe, and those fans don't necessarily like everything else. And because so many of the big hits of X-Men and Spider-Man have already been collected, it's not like people whose X-Men is not their favorite. It's not like their wish list has a lot of X-Men because it already exists. For Batman, I think what we're going to see on the poll, because I think it's represented in the omnibus poll, but it's even going to be more prominent here. Everybody wants Batman. Even people who mostly care about Wonder Woman or mostly care about Flash or mostly care about JSA or anything, even obscure stuff, war, sci-fi, I think a lot of people just have at least one Batman vote on their poll. Look, this is me. You know that I'm not a big Batman fan. I'm not a big Green Lantern fan either, but like I still have Batman in my top 2. So I really think that that's going to be a thing. I think we're going to see Batman do well, not because it's Batman and everybody's favorite is Batman, but because everybody wants at least a little bit of Batman. Goody, this was my number 1 too. Edwin Billiot is shocked. The 90s alone are going to be 30 volumes, says Drop of Saturn. Batman. Yes, says Yarny Pauls for Cool Angel, number 4. Lance the Library says, I want this Batman so badly. It just missed my vote since I had to rep Legion. Says Merv, loving this Brave Focal cover as the super job. Will this collect Legends of the Dark Knight? No, Whip Swinger. Legends of the Dark Knight has its own line on the poll. DC confirmed they think of Legends of the Dark Knight separately because it's so often not in the same period of continuity as Batman, and so it would interrupt the reading order to try to read it because it always is flashing back. However, they did confirm exclusively, let Omar and I announce for the poll that this will include Shadow of the Bat. It says it right there on my slide because that's how it's named on the poll. It begins to collect Shadow of the Bat. So they do not think of Shadow of the Bat as a separate DC Finest line. Whether it would be a separate omnibus, that's a different story entirely. But in terms of DC Finest, Shadow of the Bat will be integrated along with all those other wonderful Batman miniseries along the way. Richard B, number 1. I read both Dark Knight Detective and Cape Crusader, which collect all this stuff until Nightfall, but they did not thread it together. Andrew Lingard saying definitely voting for this, even though I assume it will do well. So, I mean, people are all in on this. And I think it's just exciting to get. It's the same as X-Men Blue and Gold, where like all of us own that X-Men already who've been buying X-Men, but we're still excited for it because it's finally how it should have been this whole time. And I love that DC basically started the DC Finest line by saying, this is how it should have been this whole time. And guess what? We're doing it. This is our top priority. This is going to define what the DC Finest line is and what is capable of. Ryan Williams saying, hey, how you doing, Krisis? Hello, Ryan Williams, my friend. All right, folks, do we know what my number 1 is? Some of you do, because you pay attention to me and you really care. You know, right? Any guesses? Number 1? I'll give you a moment. So I'll answer a couple other questions I just saw pop up. Allie's saying, I think Legend of the Dark Knight is going to need a compendium or omnibus. Here's the thing. DC did Suicide Squad in Omnibus and in DC Finest at pretty much the same time. And Suicide Squad has the Ostrander name, but it's not Batman. It does have a movie, but it's not the strongest number 1 seller of all time. This is Batman. I think much like Man of Steel, where they put out the Man of Steel DC Finest, but we've pretty much heard them say on streams, you're going to get an omnibus as soon as we can get one out. And then they also did an Absolute at the same time. We're going to see, I have no insider knowledge. This is me prognosticating. We're going to see the same thing for Legend of the Dark Knight. We're going to see it in Absolute. We're going to see it in Omnibus. Now that the time has finally come, it's a gold mine that DC has been sitting on for decades and not collecting comprehensively. They know there's money in it and they're going to milk it in every format. So I would say, I don't think you have to feel compelled to buy it in Finest because I do think it will show up in at least 2 different formats, if not 3. Again, I've not heard anything from DC like that. I don't know which one they're going to do first. I'm just saying if Suicide Squad could come out in Omnibus and Finest at the same time, if Man of Steel could come out in Finest and Absolute at the same time, Legends of the Dark Knight absolutely is going to be the same. Okay, Sasmurf says Wonder Woman. Professor X says Wonder Woman. Garnet Paul says Wonder Woman. Richard B says Hawkworld. Suspicious Ledwidge says Hawkworld. I Am Space Monkey says Plastic Man. Wonder Woman says Evan. Hash is Dead says Ambush Bug. Mighty Fox says Wonder Woman. If Bronze Age is not number 1, I'll be disappointed. Okay, here we go. It's Hawkman. And here's why. I don't want to make this about Wonder Woman because it's about Hawkman. Wonder Woman, for me, I collect an omnibus. We just finished the Silver Age. I would bet solid money on the poly market that we're going to get a Wonder Woman Bronze Age omnibus. They're just on a tear. They're moving through materials. We need Golden Age 7, which will come out in 2027 or 28. And then we're going to get Bronze Age number 1, which I think will come out probably in late 2027, 28, or 29. It's going to happen. And I love that we have that one Bronze Age Wonder Woman DC Finest volume. I'm not going to kick it out if they keep collecting backwards from there. But that's because I collect Wonder Woman omnibus. It's like the DC Finest will get here when they get here. I only have one Wonder Woman DC Finest, my whole top 25, because it's the one that I'm like, well, that's maybe never going to be an omnibus. But let's talk about Hawkworld. Now, I think this should be an omnibus, and it did incredibly well in the poll this year, but not as well as it did last year. Possibly because now that people have started buying the Hawkman DC Finest, they're like, oh, actually, maybe this would be better in DC Finest. So Hawkworld is an initial 3-issue miniseries by Tim Truman. Then it's an ongoing series by Ostrander. Then Ostrander wraps up his themes in the first 3 to 6 issues of the Hawkman ongoing after that. Then it's taken over by William Messner-Loebs. Every time I look at an issue, look at a cover, read an issue, work on this a little bit for the poll, I just get more and more and more obsessed with it. I think Finest is the perfect play to do it. I think because it's Ostrander, people are going to be interested. I think because it's Hawkworld and it's weird, people are going to be interested. And I think this is one of those runs that is going to become kind of a post original day, like certified classic, because people are going to finally be able to read it once it's collected, and then they're going to go like, oh yeah, this was amazing all the time. And in the same way that Suicide Squad, every time it gets recollected, people are like, this is the best comics ever. Yeah, a lot of people knew that, not me, but a lot of people knew that all along. But like, it takes a collection sometimes to revive material for modern readers. So congratulations to everybody who intuited that this would be my number one. This run was so good, says Allie. Goody saying we had the same top 2 picks, twinsies. I should have known. Couldn't Hawkworld be complete in one omnibus? Yes, but does DC have the confidence to do Hawkman in omnibus? Derek Tyler's number 1 is Captain Carrot. Max Appleman hasn't seen such an unexpected twist since the usual suspects are earnest, scared, stupid. Consider my pearls clutched. Okay. Hawkworld. The world is upside down. Rabbits wear shoes. Okay is innocent. Okay. Now, let's get back to the other half of the poll, which is the lines that I want. So there you go, fanfare. Woo! That is my number 1 vote. I hope it does well. I think because it did well in the omnibus poll, hopefully it'll do well here as well. And again, that's a whole issue. There's a whole year range. So it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to start right at the beginning of Hawkworld. It could start with the post-Hawkworld stuff by William Messner-Loebs. It could start anywhere. Like we're not voting on specific volumes unless there's just like one volume sandwiched by other things. Now let's get back to the lines. Here's my number 10 line. We were just talking about it. Batman Legends of the Dark Knight. So why? I think you kind of just heard me say it. If I had not a goldfish brain, I would have remembered that we were just about to come back and do this, and I would have saved all that commentary. So on one hand, it's so hotly demanded, it's going to be an omnibus. Like, duh, it's gonna be an omnibus or an absolute. On the other hand, it fits perfectly along the current DC Finest line for Batman because it's releasing in that same period, and we're about to kind of reach where this starts. So why not both? And I think you just heard my reason for why not both. I think for Suicide Squad, for Man of Steel, for anything that's like that big of a deal, DC will go to multiple formats, and that's fine. So here's the thing that became interesting to talk to DC about as the poll went on. I was like, okay, so this would collect all of, Legends of the Dark Knight. It probably would not go to the lengths of collecting any time that it crosses over with a major story, such as when it crosses over with No Man's Land or War Games, because then it's just being used as another Batman book. So this line could either just have that issue for completeness or even just skip it, because why would you collect a whole present day crossover in this line, which doesn't focus on present day books? This ran for a long time. It's 200 plus issues. So this DC Finest line, we're looking at a chunky DC Finest line. But here's the interesting thing that came up in conversation. I said, you've not consistently gotten to a point in the Batman Finests where we get to Batman retcon stories. What happens when we get to the Halloween specials, which are technically originally labeled as Legends of the Dark Knight and then later don't get labeled that way, which then yield Long Halloween, which then yields Dark Victory, which then yields Catwoman When in Rome. DC, I'm not giving a definitive answer. I do not speak for DC, but there was definitely like an eyebrow raise of like, So I can't say for sure. I don't know. If you were to ask me where Long Halloween is going to be collected, I do not know. Personally, I think it should be collected here. And DC at least was okay, and they reviewed it, so they saw it. They were okay with us putting in the wayfinding note on the poll that this might collect other retcon stuff like Long Halloween. So no one is guaranteeing that's going to happen to you, but it could happen, and certainly they are open to it. This was my number 2. Yarna Paul saying my number 4. Cedric and Ellen saying no brainer. Richard B saying I held off because I wanted an omnibus. I know they won't affect each other, but I'm sticking to the format I want, which I think vote for the thing you'll actually buy. For me, it's not in my top 10 the omnibus poll because I don't want oversized Batman, but I really want this material bad. And so it's almost, but again, we only got 5 votes. So it's not actually getting points for me, but it is in my top 10. Okay. As a new DC Peter reader, this is my number 1 pick, saying Professor X. Haunted Night, not Long Halloween. No, I'm definitely talking about Long Halloween, but I know you're talking about something different than me. But anyway, I did mean Long Halloween. Okay, Now let's go to my number 9 pick. Still not in the actual points gettings. We only got 5. My number 9 is Sandman Universe. Hear me out. Hear me out. Because I know you've heard me talk about this for years. When it comes to collecting Sandman, DC is great at collecting the stuff with Neil Gaiman's name actually on it. We've had it in every possible format at every possible size. As soon as Neil Gaiman's not there, we got nothing. And the thing is, he purposely left the gates open for the Sandman universe for other people to come in and play in the future. And that they did. So there's not only The Dreaming, which you've heard me stump for years on the DC Omnibus poll. There were also these Sandman Presents miniseries. And that was the way to extend the Sandman brand through the 2000s. As readers continued to find Sandman and join it, DC would periodically put out supporting series. None of them were particularly long, except for Dead Boy Detectives, which got its own omnibus, which I have right here. Dead Boy Detectives is the only time that any of that post-Gaiman material by somebody other than Gaiman has ever been collected. So there's really 2 chunks of this that we're talking about. We're talking about The Dreaming, which in itself is 60 issues and I think like a one-shot and a special. And then we're talking about all this other stuff, which as you can see down there on the bottom, I mean, I can't even see it because it's so small here. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential material. So I'll just like zoom in a little bit for myself so I can read it. There's, Death, the High Cost. There's Sandman itself, obviously. So everything from the Sandman line. There's Death, obviously, stuff that was in the Death Absolute and the Death hardcover. But then there was another Death thing that's not been collected with that, which is Death at Death's Door, 2003, because it's not by Gaiman. Then there's Witchcraft and Witchcraft La Terror, which are not by Gaiman, so they haven't been collected. There's Destiny, a Chronicle of Deaths Foretold, which is crazy to me that it's never been collected in any of those like Volume 5 or Volume 3 of the Sandman stuff, because it's one of the endless, but again, not by Gaiman. Then there's The Dreaming, along with its special, and along with the Merv Pumpkinhead Agent of Dream original graphic novel. Then there's Sandman Presents Love Street, Sandman Presents Petrifax, Sandman Presents Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Dreams But Were Afraid to Ask, Little Endless Storybooks. Maybe that wouldn't get included here, but I think that's illustrated by Jill Thompson, I want to say. Sandman Presents The Corinthian. Hold on, I'm running out of screen that I can see this in because there's so much. Oh gosh, now I'm just pushing buttons. So there's just so many. The Corinthians original series, the Furies original graphic novel, the Thessaliad. There's so much stuff that we could get here. And I just don't think there's ever going to be a time that we get it all in omnibus, at least for many years. I think that ship has sailed for Sandman for multiple reasons. I think because of the stuff that's happened with Neil Gaiman, because we finally got a TV show and it kind of came and went. So now it kind of feels like that's over. That constantly beating drum of like adapt this into media has ended. So it feels like the shine is a little bit off, but this is the chance to do it. Now, I had to ask DC about this because I was like, can I even put this on the poll? They're like, Sandman can be on the poll because he is adjacent to the DC world. So unlike Preacher, who is not. So then the next question is, could it be all of the stuff? And DC kind of was like, yeah, maybe. Like they didn't really commit because they clearly haven't thought that through because Sandman is not their number 1 priority. But if there's high demand for this in the votes, it could show up. So why isn't it in my top 5? Well, as you're going to see, I had other priorities for the top 5. I think this will be in my top 5 next year because I bet a couple of my top 5 actually become lines. But right now, I'm a little softer on it because it still feels like it would be easier to do an omnibus. It really would only take 3 omnibuses, 2 for Dreaming and 1 for everything else. Whereas the DC Finest line would have to kind of go on for a while. And it's Sandman and DC Finest. It's like, how do you not start with the Neil Gaiman stuff? So it's like you kind of would have to begin with the Neil Gaiman stuff for sales purposes and then jump to this. Although maybe not, because they started with Rachel Pollack's Doom Patrol in DC Finest rather than Grant Morrison. So like maybe it's possible, but it just feels like it's a little too far away from my reach in order to do that. No, Lucifer is its own line, Darth Twinkie on the poll, and you can vote for Lucifer separately. Same for Books of Magic. Edwin Billiot saying Bast and Thessaly are great miniseries. The DC said they would do the Sandman line, proves to me DC would publish this. Well, it didn't say, I want to be clear, they didn't say would. They said, if you're thinking about potential lines, yes, that line is potential. When you look at that list of 100 lines, some of them they might never get to. Some of them are going to need the votes. Yeah. Oh, Ali, I see now what you were saying about the Legend of the Dark Knight. You were saying the way they've been collected are with Haunted Night and not with Long Halloween. That I agree with. But I'm saying they were originally posed as being something akin to Legends of the Dark Knight, and they ultimately spawned not the Long Halloween. So I think we're agreeing with each other. Okay. Yes. Lucifer is non-game stuff, but it wasn't. The line I'm just drawing is that Lucifer was its own long-running series. It ran for like, what, 70 issues? Books of Magic was its own long-running series. And they both got omnibuses, and they're both right here, right next to me. I'm saying of stuff that said Sandman Presents. They haven't collected anything post-Gaiman except for Dead Boy Detectives. Okay. Let's continue to, again, still not getting an actual vote. Number 8, The Atom. Here's another one, much like Adam Strange, which I think is just perfect for the intent of this line. The Atom has been virtually invisible when it comes to DC reprints over the past 15 years. He's got almost nothing. But he was a big character. He's a multi-generational character. There are multiple versions of him, and he's around in the current DC universe. All the versions. Well, I guess 2 of the 3 versions of him are around. And he's another one of these characters that has been through so many iterations, so many series. I mean, there's the Silver Age series, then they're in the Bronze Age when he's with Hawkman. Then there's all that stuff like Sword of the Atom and Power of the Atom from the 80s, which then kind of continues thematically after the 80s into the 90s and post-Crisis. He's just got so much material, and he's a character that is known enough that if they did a DC Finest for him, it probably would do fine, and there's tons of stuff to cover. So this is really close to top 5 for me. I really think it should happen. When I look at the line, it feels like there's room for this in the line. But that said, I think that first they should probably knock out the rest of Blue Beetle. Like, I feel like they should close one line before they do this. Like, knock out Blue Beetle, or like knock out more of the Spectre, or it just feels like before we open this up, we should close another one. But I still really, really want it. Pudding Tame saying it was my number 3 vote. Nick N saying I wanted to vote for this, but it didn't quite make the cut. Okay. My number 1 vote saying Dr. Zero. All right, now to my number 7 pick. Still not quite getting my points. Steel. You heard me talk about this in my Omnibus poll picks. Again, same reason as Superboy, but even stronger. I think 90s Superman is in right now. It's on trend. I think people are enjoying reading it. I think we're seeing DC start to tackle kind of Triangle Superman in DC Finest. At the point that we get to Death and Return in DC Finest, then we should also have Steel. Also, the Triangle Omnibus line is already far enough, and I just don't think Steel would get his own omnibus. So you could just put this out now, because like people clearly already have Death and Return. They already have it in the omnibus line now too, or about to. So like this is a natural next step for them if they like that character. Plus, Steel really does not have a lot of Flashpoint, pre-Flashpoint material other than his own series, which is the magic number, 52 issues. So this is like a perfect 2 Finest. And there's some room for some guest appearances and stuff. This is an example where maybe it would have a little bit of his stuff from Reign of the Superman at the beginning of it, because much like Cascade and Batgirl, it's like intro material that flows directly into his own solo series. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just speculating based on how it looks like Cascade is going to get mapped. So like, I just think, and again, he's DC's Black Superman. He had a movie, he's been adapted, people know who he is. And even if we are like, maybe not an omnibus for this guy, I think there's people know who he is. They would buy him if given the chance. We just saw the Milestone compendiums do really well, which is not to say, oh, he's going to do the same because he's black. I'm not saying that. I'm saying Milestone occupies a similar period in DC's history where people are like, nobody really remembers or cares about that. And then people have been hot for the compendiums. I think if given the chance, people would absolutely buy this. I would be there day one to buy this. By the way, written entirely by Louise Simonson and Christopher Priest. It was a struggle to not put this in my top 5. Lance the Library saying it just missed my vote. Is it still around? Yeah, he was very recently in a bunch of Superman comics, and he had his own miniseries. Richard B saying Steel was on my long list. It didn't quite make the cut. Can't argue with Louise Simonson. Here's the thing, even though this would add a new line, and I want to be cautious about adding new lines, it's only 2 volumes. So again, you now know I want things that are 2 and 3 volumes because I want to knock them out. Let's get them through, get rid of them, get through them, have them on our shelves, have them available for reprints. Logan Wayne saying finally one of my votes. Yeah, I really, my level of excitement for this in any format is high. I probably wouldn't buy it in omnibus. It was on my omnibus list because I want it to be an omnibus, but for me personally, I would rather buy it in Finest or Compendium. It would make a perfect one and done Compendium. Okay, just missing my top 5 votes on the poll is Captain Atom. And I struggled because I really going into this thought it was going to be my number 3. The thing is, he's got this long Carrie Bates series that really needs to be collected. And he's got his Charlton material before that, which is very attractive to me. I want to see them handle him the same way they handled Blue Beetle. And that first thing that has all of his Charlton material would be so cool. Not only to finally get it all collected, but because that's the basis of Dr. Manhattan. And I think it would just be really, really fun to read that, knowing that in Alan Moore's mind at one point that was going to be directly the Captain Atom that was going to get used. But the thing for me that takes this just out of my top 5, just a pinchity pinch out of my top 5, is that after we get through those 57 issues and 2 annuals, there's really not a lot for him before the 2000s, because he really becomes a team member. And then in the 2000s, he's kind of all over the place. Like, he crosses over into the WildStorm universe. Then he has like backups in Action Comics. So it is, I want it. It's still my number 6, don't get me wrong. But I didn't actually give it a point in my votes because it just feels like, if you look at what's in my top 5, they're all like this, but more. Like, they have the same amount of material as this and the same kind of spread as this, but they're just like a little hotter or a little bit more present or a little bit more of a well-known character. I think Captain Atom is probably lesser known than Booster Gold if we're going to like stack rank the knowledge of DC characters. He is around in the current Justice League, but he's not like a current hit. I just think that I'm a little softer on this than my top 5. But again, I'm talking down about something that was my number 6. Like, I want this bad. I'm just trying to explain to you how, even though I was sure for months it was going to be in my top 5, that it did not quite turn out in my top 5. Henry Wood saying Steel was number 1 or number 2. Ali saying original Dr. Manhattan. Saz Murph saying, yeah, I like Captain Atom too. It didn't quite make my top 5 this year. Nick N saying I would buy it, but it also didn't make the cut. Dr. Zero saying I want the Charlton material. For David McSwain, it's number 3. Edwin Billion just missed. It seems like if we had 6 votes, a lot of people would have had this at number 6. So I'm really curious to see how it did in the poll. I think it's going to underachieve this year because a lot of people will have just missed doing it. And then I think once we get a couple of other things that people have been voting for into the new lines, I think this is going to like come with a vengeance. The thing about only giving 5 votes is like the spread of what happens after one of the big favorites gets made into a line next year, hopefully, fingers crossed, will be like those votes will proliferate across all the other votes. So if one of these things has like 1,000 points worth of votes, those 1,000 points immediately get reallocated everywhere else down the line. And unlike an omnibus poll where there's 700 options, on this, as soon as a new line gets made, and there's only 99 other lines to absorb those votes. So that is really, really fascinating to me. And Sir Reezy saying my number 3. Welcome. I don't think I've said hello to you. Okay, now we're into the ones actually getting points from me. Number 5. Come on, baby. You know what you're going to get with me. It's WildStorm time. WildStorm at number 5. Here's the thing. I don't have any influence over DC, but I did have an influence over how the poll was built. So as we were going through the poll, you know me, I started out with all of these lines separately. Backlash, The Authority, Wildcats, Stormwatch, The Authority. DC was like, Krisis. No, take them off of there. And I said, okay, but please, sir, could we possibly just maybe have an overall WildStorm line just to test the waters of the interest of the peasants who remember the 90s, the old elderly peasants? And DC was like, okay, that's fair, because they were their own separate continuity and they had already put milestone titles on there because we have Static. So even though this isn't in main DC continuity, which is kind of the general rule, like even Sandman is adjacent to and interacts with main DC continuity, I basically like begged and got a special exception. Not that they're going to print it because of me. I don't have that kind of power, but I got a special exception to put it on the poll. So I take it being on the poll pretty seriously. It's a real expression of interest. All they have to go by right now are the sales of the Wildcats Compendium, which was always going to sell because it's Jim Lee, and the Stormwatch Compendium, which maybe was always going to sell because it's Warren Ellis and also because it precedes the Authority. And then they have those 2 Authority omnibuses. But like, actually, DC Finest might be a great format for WildStorm because it can blow through 20 or 30 issues per book. And a lot of WildStorm original series are right in that like 20 to 40 issue range. So like the original run of Wildcats, probably 3 with all the miniseries and could be knocked out, maybe 4. Like Backlash, Stormwatch, a lot of these titles could easily be knocked out. So I want to make clear that this is not suggesting it's going to be a compendium of WildStorm titles and that they're going to be interwoven. It was just that DC would not let me list them all on the poll separately. And honestly, it might be better for WildStorm to have them separately on the poll, or to have them not separately in the poll, because it kind of acts as a lightning rod to collect everybody's votes. Had to go with WildStorm as my number 1. I thought WildStorm would have been number 1. Well, I guess you're going to see what I chose instead. Lance the Library saying I did not vote for any WildStorm, but it would be cool to see. G-Wiz says 5 flames on the side of his face. He was sure this would be my number 1. I put it as my number 1. You're just going to see. I just have other priorities. And here's the thing. I'm not, it doesn't, we already have some compendiums. I kind of would like to see them stay in compendiums for WildStorm because it just gives us the chance to get more material out more quickly. But I also recognize that like a Backlash compendium is not going to sell as well as like a Backlash DC Finest would. So I recognize that DC Finest comes with some built-in sales, and I recognize that. And Logan Wayne saying, solid Oliver over there, Krisis. Better English accent than Dick Van Dyke. Logan Wayne, one of the hardest things to do, because I still am reading all of X-Men aloud with Kid Krisis. We've read every X-Men issue, every mutant of every kind, out loud from 1974, and we're up to 1996. The only character she reads is Jubilee. And also Artie and Leech. So I've done all of the voices. And we're getting to the point that I do not have enough differentiation in my British accent anymore to do all the different Brits. And I'm trying to make them sound different. And I have like a decent Pete Wisdom and a decent Megan. I cannot get a accent for Chamber. I'm trying to do kind of like maybe like Liverpool or like, I don't know. It's so bad. And it trends really, really Irish because I just do not have a good accent. Okay. Everybody thought this was going to be my number one. So what's higher than WildStorm? Maybe this was a folly. Maybe I should have just put it at number one. But I have 4 things that to me, pour moi, is a higher priority. And you're going to be surprised at this next one. My number 4 on the poll is Black Lightning. Why? DC has repeatedly said that Black Lightning is a huge player in their universe. He's one of the leaders of the Justice League right now. He had his own TV show. They're always saying how important he is. And honestly, he makes so much more sense as a leader of the Justice League than Cyborg. Cyborg is a Teen Titans character, and he doesn't really fit in with the Justice League. Black Lightning fits in perfectly with the Justice League. If you were asking me my ideal Justice League, and I had to pick my 7, I'm going to pick Black Lightning every single time. To me, he is a core leader. And here's the thing. He has highly celebrated material, which is almost entirely, after the very beginning of it, written by Jenny Blake Isabella. Some of it has been collected separately. There's not a ton of it. He's got a 1977 11-issue series. He's briefly in World's Finest Comics and also a story from Canceled Comics Cavalcade. He has an issue of DC Comics Presents. He's got a 2-issue arc of Justice League of America. He's in Detective Comics for a while. Then he has a 1995 series, which this cover is drawn from. Then he has a Year 1 series in 2009, and then he's in a few issues of DC Universe Presents. That's it. We're talking about 1, maybe 2 DC Finest volumes for a character that has broad recognition that DC is claiming is one of their major characters of all time. So here's a time that you will hear me say, DC so white? Where are the black characters in the here's the DC Finest books on my shelf. Where's the black characters? Where? I don't see them. And that's partially because, and I know we got Milestone, and I know that, they've got to start with stuff that's going to sell well. But my point is that DC claims that Black Lightning is this big of a deal. And I think he is that good of a character. And it's almost all written by Jenny Blake Isabella, one of the all-time greats, universally beloved. It would be so easy to just put this in DC Finest and make it permanently available. Are you feeling me? Because, Logan saying, whoa, Nick N saying, this is surprising. Please show us my attempt at a Scouse accent. No, thank you. Lance Library saying, nice. Henry Wood saying, Black Lightning is another of my top votes. Yes. Edwin Billion saying, he should have his own line. Needs to happen. I would love this. Static, I just don't have... Oh, Static. Saz is right. There is one black hero with their own DC Finest line. And it is Static. I probably ignored him because it's Milestone, so it's not in DC continuity, which I still love it, and it's still important to me, and I'm still happy they made it. But can we get a DC... Cyborg doesn't really need a DC Finest line because he's almost all Teen Titans, so it's really like Steel... Mr. Terrific doesn't have enough solo material. It's really like Steel and Black Lightning. But I don't, this is not like affirmative action. I don't think it should exist just because he's black. I think it should exist because the material's good and I fucking want it. Okay. Logan Wayne pointing out the Chamber is from London. We'll talk about this on the after show. We'll talk about English accents on the after show. Save it for the after show because I want to get into it with you. Okay. Number 3, are you ready? My top three. Oh, wait. I want to get this. Jenny the Geek, by the way, so cool to see you here, saying, I would feel like an insane value for many customers seeing 1977 to 2011. That's over 30 years of comics in one trade. And here's the thing, it might not all fit into one trade, so these year ranges are the year ranges that the entire line would have, but counting this up, it really might fit into one trade. And even if it was two, it's a great value for two. DC Finest are very affordable. And if they broke it into two, it's kind of like, would they then put in a couple team appearances? Maybe. But this really, seriously, could be one. Could also be a compendium. But I would love to have this. I think it should exist. It's also a thing I would love to see in Omnibus, but it's like, come on, DC. It's so easy to choose to do this, and it's so easy to have it, and then it's one more line off the list because it's so short. All right, my top 3 lines. My most wanted lines. Number 3 is Shazam. Because he's an untested seller in Omnibus. I know there's so many omnibusable runs of Shazam. There's the Golden Age. There's his 70s stuff, which we have had in hardcover. There's this 90s series that you keep hearing us talk about show after show how good it is. And you see everybody in the comments being like, I didn't know. And then I read it and I discovered it was so good. Like, everybody loves this book. And then he's also got 2000 stuff too. Look at all that stuff in that box. You're going to have to like open up the magnifier on your computer to see it all. The thing that's threatening is that it is so much material. Like, this is not a 2 and done line. Each one of his individual series is going to need at least 2, and probably more than that for some of them. And then there's all of that Fawcett Golden Age material. The thing is, I think that this is one of the most hotly desired Golden Age material in all of comic books, because it's widely acknowledged as like the best, the purest, the most joyful and lovable Golden Age superhero material that there was in Western comic books. DC has the rights to it. Yes, they missed the window on the movies, so they probably can't put it out in Omnibus now because it's just not going to have the sales attraction. But there's so much to get through. There's like a Batman level, not Batman, but I mean, there's a level of this that's enough to get through that certainly as much material as Wonder Woman, actually more than Wonder Woman, almost a Batman level, because during the Golden Age, he had his own title, he was in Wiz Comics, there was Captain Marvel Family, there was Captain Marvel Jr., so the Golden Age stuff goes on and on and on and on, and there's a ton of it. So like, we've got to crack into it, and I just think, let's just get one out and just see. Let's just see, and if it doesn't sell, then we know that it doesn't sell, but there's basically 150 issues of multiple series. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 issues that are 4 series that are 120 issues or more. So we're talking about an endless amount of DC Finest. Could it ever happen? I don't know. But I want to see them try. And if at least they put out a first one, then we'd know. And you know what? If it doesn't sell any copies and people read it and they're like, I don't really care about this, and we don't hear the level of excitement and acclaim that we had about DC War, then fine. Then we know, but at least we'll know. And I really want it. I want that Golden Age material. So, okay. Goody voted for this. Since Golden Age Captain Marvel outsold Superman, we deserve to have it on our shelves. David saying this is my number 4. Shazam was my number 1. Sure, it would be my number 1 too. What's going to be my top 2? Richard would love to see some Fawcett Captain Marvel, similar to the Charlton Blue Beetle. Oh my God, Samantha voted for this. I'd love to read The Power of Shazam. Would they reprint the Monsters Society of Evil, though? They canceled that reprint a few years ago. Well, I mean, they might print it in the scope of doing this. I don't know. Yeah. And Jerry Ordway, never underappreciated on this channel, but I do agree with you, Brian, that he's underappreciated. He's on my Mount Rushmore. For me, if I'm talking about like modern meaning like post Bronze Age comic artists that to me are the all-time greats, my Mount Rushmore is like Alan Davis, Jerry Ordway. Like he's probably right after Alan Davis for me. I love him. I absolutely obsessed with Jerry Ordway. Okay. And saying Jerry Ordway deserves to be celebrated. And putting Tame says, I agree, this is the most highly desired Golden Age material. All right, we only have 2 more. Then it's going to be time for an after party. So grab that URL from the description. Here we go. My number 2 most wanted new DC Finest line is Firestorm. Firestorm, and this was going to be my number 1 for a long time, and at the last possible second, I changed my mind. So we'll see if that pays for me in the end. I think he's now DC's hero. He's their most undercollected hero with the longest running individual series that is undercollected, if that makes any sense. Because that Firestorm, the Nuclear Man series, ran under 2 different titles for 100 issues. And as has been well covered on all of our streams at this point, written by Jerry Conway and Ostrander. So like high pedigree that fans love. Much like Captain Atom, he kind of tails off after that. There's really not a lot of him in the 90s because he's in team books. And then he has a little bit of material in the early 2000s. But then, unlike Captain Atom, he has a substantial series in the mid 2000s that also could stand to be collected in DC Finest. So that's what to me elevates him above Captain Atom. I think he's about as known and about as visible as Captain Atom. I just think he has more material across a further spread of years of Captain Atom that makes it a little bit more attractive to me. This is a slam dunk. I would probably bet real money that DC is going to do 1 volume of this next year because they've been hearing us pound the drums for it on the DC Omnibus poll several years in a row. I know in my heart this is going to be at least top 20 in the lines. I just know because it does so well it's top 10 on the Omnibus poll, and some of the things in the top 10 of the Omnibus poll are already a DC Finest line, so I think this is going to do pretty well on the lines. Again, I don't look at the results. I'm purely prognosticating, but I think it is time. Doc Zero saying my number 4. Nick N saying yes to Firestorm. Ali saying rest in peace to Jerry Conway. Logan saying people really love Firestorm. Nicola saying this was my number 2 as well. Saz Murph number 1. D. Marcellus here. Hello, friend. Edward Billings saying my number 3. Lance saying my number 4. Derek saying my number 4. Xbox saying my number 1. This is why I'm pretty sure we're going to see it in the top 20, probably in the top 10. Everybody wants it. They want it because it's not collected. They want it because he has cool wizard sleeves and a head that's on fire. They want it because of Conway and Ostrander. They want it because they don't think they're going to see it in Omnibus. Even more, my number 2, my number 3. I'm telling you, this is going to show up at the top of the poll, and I really think we're going to see it soon. I really do. But this, hopefully, the sales will match. So here's kind of like the unspoken thing about this poll, but I'll say it because I'll say shit. And again, DC, they did say some things to me confidentially, which I am not saying on screen. I do know how to hold my tongue when required. But here's the thing that I can intuit that maybe not everybody's thinking about. DC has only ever had a poll like this for the Tigereyes poll, and it's only existed for 3 years. And the Tigereyes poll is about omnibuses. In that same period, they started putting out DC Finest. They have very quick real-time feedback on how well these DC Finest volumes and lines are selling. So when they get this data, let's say they put out Firestorm next year, they're going to immediately see how well it does compared to whatever, let's say they also put out Shazam. They're going to get immediate feedback of if the interest in the market for these matches the interest on the poll. Same thing for like on the volume side. Like they're going to see like, how well do the top volumes sell compared to Batman, which I think obviously all of us is their top seller. And that's good because I think if they see that the poll demand is real and it translates to sales demand, that makes them go like, oh hell, these internet fans actually like know something. They've got a point here. It turns out they will show up for these series. And I think that's a good thing. So my fervent hope is not only that we get Firestorm and DC Finest, but that actually all these people that are showing up and saying, I would buy it, that we all buy it. And then DC is like, hell, for a series that like has very few, like existing collections for us to use as comps, it turns out that the Finest poll was right on point. Tons of people bought this. Plus he's got a current series, which is always a great reason to have a comp collected edition. All right. So to my number 1, what have you not seen yet? Honestly, right now thinking, I can't think of what it is. I already did WildStorm. I already did Sandman. There's no Wonder Woman. I genuinely forget what I have at number 1. I mean, I'm sure I love it. It's just I spent so many months assuming Firestorm is going to be not my number 1 that now I can't think of what I made number 1. So your guess is as good as mine. Uh-oh. Okay, here we go. X-Men. Ryan thinks my number 1 is going to be X-Men. And honestly, here's the thing. Cheating is not worth it on these polls. They're not a popularity contest. And if you think, I could see the perspective of like, and not even cheating. Let's say you tell your whole family reunion, go and vote Firestorm, right? And you're thinking, because I really want it. And if it's number 1, DC might print it. But that's the thing. If DC prints it and nobody buys it, then that's not only bad for the Firestorm line, that's bad for them caring about the poll. The fact that they came to us this year and said, would you like to run this poll? And we said, hell yes, means that potentially they see value in hearing all of your voices. And for everybody who tries to like game the system, and if that gaming turns out to result in sales that is not analogous to what the poll suggested, that hurts all of us. So I really, really wanted to say, vote for things you'll really buy. And the thing that I would most like to buy, people are guessing like romance, Young Heroes in Love, Sugar and Spike, Power Girl. There's a star man waiting in number 1. I probably could have given myself a note to jump off from there, but okay. And we already have Hawkman, so what is it going to be? Freedom Fighters? Omega Men? My number 1 most wanted line is Martian Manhunter. Because I think he is arguably DC's biggest JLA level star without a finest line. We've got Green Lantern, we've got Flash, we've got the Trinity, we've got Green Arrow. I put Martian Manhunter probably right around the same level as Green Arrow in terms of how much I associate him with the JLA. He's been in cartoons. He has this amazing current Absolute book. There's a hunger for this material out there, and there's basically just 3 big chunks. I guess we could call it 4. There's his House of Mystery backups and his Detective Comic backups, which I find really fun. I know some people find them tedious. I really, really enjoy them, and I want them in a book. Then we have his like immediate post-crisis stuff, which like might never make it into an omnibus because it's just like a weird 8 issues. And then we have that Ostrander series, which is 36 or 38 issues, which means it would be perfect to like mush together with that post-crisis stuff and break into 2 books, right? And then he does have a brief 2006 issue, and then he's also got some solo stories and stuff that could be in there as well. So the thing is that this is an important line. I think it's a line that'll probably sell really well. It's one of DC's most recognizable heroes across all media. It's a hero that sold like gangbusters in his new Absolute line. It's almost like everybody who gets an Absolute should have a finest. And don't we have a finest for everybody that's an Absolute? Let's think about it. We're about to get Absolute Catwoman. She has a finest. We have Absolute Green Arrow. He has a finest. Green Lantern, Flash, they all have finest. This is the only person who's got a solo Absolute book that doesn't have a finest line. I think if the characters are big enough to have an Absolute and recognizable enough and branded enough, then they're big enough to have a DC finest. And this is severely undercollected. So much of this stuff has never been collected in color. Some of it's been collected in black and white and showcase, but like this is stuff that fans will show up for because they love Martian Manhunter, and it will be the only time that it is collected. Like that's a great sales motivation. We've seen that again and again in the DC Finest line already, that when something that's like mildly popular to begin with, but then they're cracking into uncollected stuff, people go feral. Even the Wonder Woman Bronze Age, and a lot of people are like, Bronze Age Wonder Woman is tedious. Nobody likes pre-crisis Wonder Woman. Yeah, but people went friggin' crazy for that volume because it's never been collected in color before. This represents a huge opportunity for DC. It's Silver Age material that really is strong, and because it's only 6 to 10 pages per issue, you can cram a lot of it into every finest. And then that 90 series is by Ostrander. This to me, if I worked there, if they gave me a say and they said, Krisis, this is about your personal opinion, but also what you think will do well, and I had to pick one line, I guess first I would pick Legends of the Dark Knight, because I do want them to make money. If I could pick 2, and after I picked Legends of the Dark Knight, which is a short seller, this is the one. I truly believe this is the one. It will make money. It will sell. People will be happy. I will be happy. I've been working on a Martian Manhunter guide for a year now. It's slow going because it's so poorly collected that like there's nothing for me to sit down and refer to. I'm having to like look up the information of every issue one by one on things like League of Comic Geeks and on things like comics.org because like it's just not well collected, and it's not all on DC Infinite. But that's not the only reason I want it. I won because I like Martian Manhunter. I think he's a cool character. I don't think there's any other character at Marvel or DC that's really like him. He's this man who he's a Martian, or is he a Martian or a man? I have a song about that I wrote. Remember that from last year? Who got summoned to Earth, and he's trying to make a life for himself on Earth, doing the thing he knows how to do, like being a cop, upholding the law, but he's always got this secret inner identity, and he's not sure if he should reveal it to anybody or not. So it's a wonderful metaphorical book in the same way that X-Men is. I just think that I look at the line and I don't know that there's anything I would kick out. No, that's a lie. I know that I would kick out the fucking Demon. I love the Demon. He's a character I enjoy. And this Kirby material is obviously always going to be a seller because Kirby's always a seller. But if I look at this and then I look at that, I think that should have come out before the Demon. Okay, I have words. I'm throwing down. I'm making it real. I think that Martian Manhunter should have gotten a DC Finest line before the Demon. There, I've said it. Okay. Let's see what you've all had to say. Let's see. People were still pumping for Omega Men. Good choice. The Cookie Man himself. Kevin Cork saying, yes, Martian Manhunter. Nicholas saying, my number 3. Edwin Billiot should have guessed Martian Manhunter. Duh. Sludgevich, great choice. Lance Larray, oh, I should have guessed. Just missed my top 5. Oh, I was sure that you would vote for him, Lance. Jay Hoppus saying, was my number 2. Had Impulse as my number one. Nick N loves Impulse. Richard, oh, that makes sense. Martian Manhunter was one of the ones that just missed the cut. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear that everyone voted for him. Yes, please give me that 1988 material on. Please, please, please. I completely agree, MK Goff. My first pick was the detective genre line, which would be very fun. I agree, that would be fun. Derek Tyler says anything Ostrander needs to be reprinted. Manhunter, Firestorm, Suicide Squad. Yes, Manhunter, Mark Shaw. We need it all. James Robe saying that's when you make sure your entire family buys Firestorm. Henry Wood saying read Martian Manhunter 1 million a few weeks ago and it was incredible. Arguably the best absolute book. Can confirm Am Farrell. So although Ali saying my favorite absolute is Superman. I haven't read them for like 6 months now, but at the time, tight call between Wonder Woman and Superman. Brian saying I have all the single issues from 1988 to 2006 and would still pick this up immediately. Great book. Goody, surprised Zatanna is in there. Here's the thing, and maybe I'll like just verbally reveal a few of this. I don't have them in a slide form. Pretty much I was going to go to 30 for my most wanted lines, but I realized everything that was lower everything that was like a little bit lower in lines for me was stuff that it just feels like Omnibus has kind of like got under control at this point. So going down from Adam Strange and what was my last one? Black Orchid, Blue Devil. Anyway, whatever 25 was. My next few would have been Dr. Fate, which I think we have that compendium size trade. It feels like we could, and then some is by Ostrander. We maybe could get an Omnibus. Deathstroke, I think we're doing fine with Omnibus. Zatanna, I really want to see a Silver Age, a Bronze Age Omnibus to match the Dini Omnibus. Impulse, that one I probably could see making it in my top, but I do feel like maybe better for compendium, just like Robin is good for compendium. Question, we've had an Omnibus. Animal Man, we've had an Omnibus. Checkmate is another one that'll probably migrate into my top 25. Starman, we've had a compendium. So like a lot of the ones are things that either are already kind of happening in Omnibus, or I feel like they would be better served with an Omnibus. Birds of Prey, Hitman, Lobo, which is in compendium, Warlord. So a lot of the stuff that was like my next 10 or 15 choices were very things that I really feel like they're handling well elsewhere. Oh, got the fucking demon laughs. Poor demon. Smarfington gasps. I agree, frankly, but genre me saying, but the demon is my boy. Like I said, I like the demon. I just think I know that it's because it has Kirby's name and it's kind of well-known material and they kind of wanted to go to the well and kind of get all of the stuff that's the best known material out there and just be like, hey, here's this thing that people ask us to reprint all the time. Let's put it in Finest. But I just am like, really? The demon before Martian Manhunter? I don't know. The Martian Manhunter miniseries from 88 by J.D. DeMatteis, another huge selling creator that everybody always loves. Might need to include JLA Pulp Heroes Annual in the hypothetical 90s. It's all about Martian Manhunter. And again, those notes at the bottom of my slides, this is not a mapping show. I just was trying to hit the general stuff that I know that the DC Finest would hit. But, clearly we could get into mapping them. And actually, if you want to get into that, I'll put it in the description sometime after the show. I didn't think to put it in before. But we have this thing called the DC Finest mapping sheet that I run along with Joey Hines and Charlie Pote, that every time anybody maps a prospective DC Finest volume, we add it to the sheet, and it has all the existing volumes too, so it's really easy to kind of like plan your purchases and then see what fits around them. I use that research hugely for the DC poll planning, so I'm so thankful. The way it started was Joey just one day, I think on Facebook, showed up with this post that was like, I mapped all 90 Batman volumes, here they are. And I was like, and it was beautiful. It was like breathtaking. It was so perfect. He put so much thought into it. And I was like, have you like, do you have that in a permanent way? He's like, I've got it in like a Word document. I'm like, no. I mean, do you have it like in a way that's like data? Have you like put it in a spreadsheet? And he's like, I'm not really a spreadsheet guy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, would you let me do it for you? And he's like, yeah, sure. And that's how the DC Finest sheet began. And by the way, Joey's mapping is so right on. He even included Shadow of the Bat. DC's so close. Joey, the mapping is perfect. And so that kind of was the genesis of all of that. So anyway, long story short, to say to Jenny the Geek, if we were to actually do an issue-to-issue mapping of Martian Manhunter, I think we would probably speculate that it would include that Pulp Heroes annual. Just that for the purposes of this show, I really tried to stay away from mapping because these things got out of control. Okay. Am I a man or am I a Martian? If I'm a man, I'm a Martian of a man. Do we remember my song? Gosh, I don't know if I remember it, or maybe I would play it at the beginning of the after party. Okay, Captain Carrot just knocked out Martian Manhunter for me. It's surprising how uncollected Martian Manhunter is. Okay, and we need Martian Manhunter. And James always here, although clearly you're not going to write that down from being on screen, but it is in the chat and I will put it in the description. So just one final reminder, you just have until Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time to vote on this DC Finest poll. So you've got a little bit over 48 hours. You're going to vote on 5 of your lines and you're going to vote on 8 of your wished for volume ranges. The order you put them in is important. There's demographic information that we ask. None of it's required, but I think it's going to be really useful to DC, especially when it asks how many DC Finest volumes you already have. And I want to say this, it's not to discount people who have fewer volumes to be like, oh, they only have 4. I don't care about their opinion. No, it allows DC to look at the data and say, ooh, and they're not going to get everybody's ballot. They're not getting anybody's email address. They're getting aggregated data, but it allows them to say, oh, interesting. This book, let's just pick something randomly. Captain Atom. Captain Atom is a top choice of people who only have 10 DC Finest. Is that because he's a Charlton character? Is it because he's so undercollected? Whereas of people of all of the Finest, he's not that high of a choice. Like, it allows DC to like interrogate the data a little bit and be like, ooh, interesting, like the people who aren't buying Finest yet would buy Finest if we did this. So really, please fill out the demographic questions if you can. There's only 62 current Finest released as of the date of the poll. So if you have all of them, you can just pick 60 to 70 as your range and know that that's right. Otherwise, just count them up on your shelf. And you know, you don't have to be right down to the number. I know it's hard to go around your house counting omnibuses every time. Just kind of be general. People are asking, why did we put omnibuses and compendiums in the demographic data on the poll as well? Because we just thought it would be interesting for DC to know, again, to see that these really don't compete with omnibuses. Like if people are voting for all these DC Finest and they're like, yeah, I own 50 DC Finest and I also own 200 DC Omnibus, that's a piece of information that they have never been able to gather before. And so I think that's really, really useful for them. So look, I'm so happy to have done this for you. It makes me so excited. I hope this inspires you to make some choices if you have not already made your vote in the poll. If you made your vote in the poll, maybe this causes you to go out and look for other lines on your personal life. It's going to be a little bit until I think next week until we do the DC Finest results on Near Mint Condition, which is going to be a lot of work. So I'm already got started on the layout and things, but I don't know what the results are until the poll closes in 48 hours. However, next week, I have to do the DC Fantasy Omnibus draft with you, because if I don't, they're going to start announcing omnibuses soon. If you've been following the Marvel omnibuses, there have been some announced that we had in the fantasy draft, some of which that I picked. When I do the DC Omnibus Fantasy Draft, I'll also talk about an update on how to score and submit your Marvel Fantasy Draft choices. So hopefully that will be next week's show if I'm not too underwater preparing for the results of DC Finest. And then after that, there's so much more planned. We're going to talk about how to build your collection. We're going to do more ranking. There's going to be more X-Men. And Max and I recorded a test recording of what is going to become the revival of the Crushing Krisis podcast. More on that in the after show. So I end this every week by saying, look, if we love all of these superheroes so much in our fictional life, are we being heroes in the real world? What it means being a hero in the real world, it means being kind to people and having compassion for people. And it means remembering that everybody matters and everybody needs defending, especially when they are marginalized and there are people trying to harm them. Trans lives matter and need our support and allyship, and just to be treated as regular old human beings. They're not special aliens. They're just our trans brothers and sisters and our non-binary siblings. So please, let's give them love. Black lives matter. Asian lives do not deserve hate. Immigrants are people just like the rest of us that just happen to move. It's crazy in this world that the idea of moving to a different country where you think the opportunities might be better for you can be met with hate. It's something that I did, and you all think it's cool that I moved to New Zealand. Why don't we treat every immigrant this way? And if we go through DC Comics, we're going to find examples in the comic books of every one of these situations, whether it's a literal immigrant from another place like Superman or Martian Manhunter, or whether it's somebody who's allegorically in the closet about their identity, or somebody who actually in retrospect was in the closet about their identity, like Alan Scott. We love all these characters. So where is this love and heroism in the real world? Please see it through. Please be the person to match the reader who you are. I hopefully will see you in just a moment in the after party, and I will see you next week back on the show. I will see you in Near Mint Conditions sometime very soon. But until I see you next, I want to say, hope, wish for you even, don't have a crisis. Unless, of course, it's me.